Chapter 598. Li Yunxin's cabin was on the upper floor, so he had a small porthole open. He had originally opened the porthole, so at this time, faint moonlight shone in. He looked at the woman for a while under the moonlight, stretched and smiled. Oh, it's the wife of the Wu family. This Miss Wu from the Wu clan was only slightly less famous than him on this dragon warship, because there was only one woman on the whole ship, and she was the wife of Wu Jiasong, a merchant on the same ship. The two of them were going to Chongji Island, where the wife of the Wu family's maiden family was. She was not ugly, and could even be considered pretty. She was warm and cheerful, and Wu Jiasong doted on her, so she was quickly known by the people on the ship. These days, she was the subject of many dirty jokes by the men on the ship. Occasionally, Wu Jiasong would hear them, but he could only sulk and hope to get off the ship as soon as possible. After Li Xiaoxian's reputation spread, this woman also came to him to see her fortune. In fact, she was praying for a child. Li Yunxin asked about the details of her life like he asked other people, and carefully observed her, thinking that she should not be the person he was looking for. These days, he used this method to check many people, but he did not expect that there would be a time when he failed miserably. This woman was, or rather, she was one of them. His worries and speculation were correct. As expected, this ship had been infiltrated by the Freemasonry, or Southernwood House. These two organizations were really pervasive, but because of this it proved that he was right to do so. These people mingled with mortals, and most of them were also mortals. It was difficult to find them with magic, so he could only use mortal methods to deal with them. Otherwise, it would be like an elephant fighting an ant. Even if he had great strength, how could he beat them? So he said again, "You really hit it well. You said you were bought by Wu Jiasong when you were 7, and married him when you were 12. Are you lying to me?" The woman stared at him for a while, then closed the door and said, "It's true. My real name is Pan He. Don't call me the wife of the Wu family. Your Excellency, which side are you from?" Li Yunxin snorted with a smile. "If I said something wrong, wouldn't I be killed by you?" Pan He shook her head solemnly. "You are also a watertight person. If you hadn't intentionally told me that story, I wouldn't have been able to find you. Since it's intentional, it must be to lure me out." But he said that he was wrong, and was afraid that I would kill him. Then, "Your Excellency must be someone from Munanju." Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. He originally thought that it would be the so-called servants of Southernwood residents. Although he did think of the Freemasons when he was considering it, it was only out of habit. This was because after the battle on Cloud Mountain, almost all the wandering souls were abandoned by the so-called elders. With the death of the two false saints, the remaining wandering souls scattered in all directions. The leaders were all gone. Those who didn't know the inside story wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Moreover, they had no reason to keep an eye on him. But now that Pan He guessed that she was from Munanju, it meant that she was from the Freemasonry. Damn it. Why are these things still haunting me? What did they want to do now? As soon as he thought of this, the smile on his face disappeared. His body swayed slightly and he jumped down from the hammock. "Oh? So you are a member of the Freemasonry. Strange. All of you have already become wandering ghosts. So why are you still involved in this matter? Why are you looking for me?" The cabin was narrow. Pan He slowly took a step back and calmly said, "Now we are no longer enemies. There is no reason for us to have a conflict." Li Yunxin smiled. "I am a servant. I only care about doing things. It's useless to say this to me. No matter what you are here to do. In short, you will only hinder me. Die." Pan He immediately put her hand into her sleeve and took out something. She said calmly, "If you want to kill me, then we will die together. And sink this ship. No matter what you want to do, you can't do it anymore." Li Yunxin frowned and pretended to hesitate. Then he saw that she was holding a black iron egg in her hand. This thing is called a hand grenade, hand thunder. Once it is triggered, there is nothing it cannot destroy within 10 steps, and everything within 100 steps will be destroyed. When Pan He said these words, her tone was a little stiff. Obviously, this was what the person who gave this thing to her said, and now she had learned it. "I don't want to use it, and don't force me to use it. Your Excellency, listen to me first. Li Yunxin pretended to be afraid. Pan He thought that her plan had worked, so she put down the grenade. The Freemasonry is no longer the Freemasonry of the past. In the past, we only knew to serve the elders, and Mu Nanju was one of our enemies. As for why we were enemies, I am not very clear. Now that the elders are gone, of course, there is no reason for us to be enemies. Let me interrupt. Li Yunxin said, what is your identity in the Freemasonry? How can you say such things? What Pan He said was obviously not something a small character should know. It was like a low-level civil servant talking about how to interact with other countries. Of course, it was okay to talk in private. But to seriously think that he could make decisions was really crazy, when compared to the ambassadors of other countries. Pan He smiled faintly and said confidently, in the new Freemasonry, I am in charge of the Donghai Kingdom, and Your Excellency, if I am not mistaken, should be the Donghai Kingdom's shopkeeper. We heard that you are also on the ship. We are a little surprised to see you tonight. Your Excellency is really a little young. There was also a Donghai Kingdom shopkeeper on the ship. He cast the net and wanted to catch the small fish. He didn't expect to find 2 big fish swimming over. It was really damn it. Li Yunxin was stunned at first, then smiled. Humph. You know how to read people. So in charge? Nice to meet you. Tell me, what is your so-called new Freemasonry going to do? Pan He's expression became serious. Let's talk about your Freemasonry first. We have always known that your Freemasonry likes to use ordinary people, claiming to come from the masses and to the masses. Although I am not clear about the ultimate goal of your Freemasonry, I am clear about your position. You don't like the old Freemasonry, and in fact, you don't like the old Xianmen either. You want the world to be a world of mortals, so you want to get rid of my Freemasonry first, and then Xianmen, right? Li Yunxin blinked. He had naturally tried to figure out what Mu Nanju wanted to do, but he was not sure. However, he could see the inclination and position that Pan He mentioned. Mu Nanju indeed didn't like cultivators. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked Li Chunfeng to go to Xianmen to kidnap his mother. This could be confirmed from the Battle of Yunshan. Mu Nanju's people added fuel to the fire. They were ruthless to the Freemasonry, but they were also merciless to Xianmen. So he smiled mysteriously. It seems that shopkeeper Pan has done a lot of homework. So what about your Freemasonry now? A few days ago, we no longer had any goals. The elders abandoned us, and the Lord died. Pan He said. So the people's hearts gradually dispersed, and we were about to fall apart. There must be a reason why a group of people gathered together. Money and fame are all reasons, but there is no way to gather people's hearts. So we have set a new goal. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Oh, what goal? It is similar to your Freemasonry's goal, and it complements each other. Pan He said straightforwardly. Exterminate the dragons. Li Yunxin was stunned for a while. Exterminate the dragons? Your Freemasonry doesn't like Xianmen, because they exploit the people. The dragons are the same. Although the demons and Xianmen hate each other, they are of the same nature. They should be exterminated, so that the mortals can live a good life. Moreover, that dragon head and dragon son are the culprits who almost destroyed our Freemasonry. Whether for public or private reasons, the dragons and demons should all die. This is our new goal. Shopkeeper should also know that the demons of the dragons have set up a little demon protection association in the Yi Kingdom. They say it is for the well-being of the demons, but also to treat the people well. It sounds better than the demons of Xianmen in the past. However, it is just a change in form. At most, it is an improvement. However, if the mortals want a new world, improvement can't be changed. The old class must be overthrown. Demons, Xianmen cultivators, they should all be swept into the garbage. When she said this, Li Yunxin hurriedly said, Stop. What you said? Who said it? It sounded more and more familiar. This shouldn't be the tone of the people of this world. Goddamn, he had worked so hard to bring down the Freemasons. Now they have become a sacred organization, fighting for the interests of mortals? He worked hard to earn the identity of Dragon Son for himself, but now it has become a backward and reactionary class to be overthrown? What the hell is this? Are these people from the Freemasonry addicted to making trouble? Pan he paused. I read it from a book. Damn it. Li Yunqin sighed. Don't lie to me that I don't read enough. Which book says this now? Improvement? Class? Pan he finally smiled. This was the first time she smiled. But it was a very annoying smile. It was the kind of, I don't care about people like you who don't know much kind of feeling. A D person wrote it. But it's not a book that you can read. Although the Lord is not here, the foundation of Yunshan is gone. But we have stations all over the Midland. In the stations there are things that you can't imagine. For example this. She shook the grenade again. The name of this thing was exactly the same as what Li Yunqin knew in his previous life. And its function was also similar. But after a little investigation, he knew it was not the same thing. This thing was not filled with gunpowder or explosives. It looked like it was refined with magic. It was not difficult to detonate it, just hit it hard. The thing inside should be very unstable. She brought this with her. How bold. Crazy. Li Yunqin snorted. You used to kill innocent people. How much killing you have done. But now, you say that you are just and selfless for the well-being of the world. Do you dare to ask for such well-being? Pan he was still smiling. Same here. You have killed many people, haven't you? 500 years ago, when the Qing kingdom changed dynasties, didn't you instigate it? How many innocent people have died? Besides, she stopped smiling. People like us used to work for the elders. We have experienced the feeling of not being treated as a human, and now we know what it is like to be immortal. It is useless for us to talk about these things. Please tell the owner of Munanju. I have come here to inform your esteemed society of this, and also for other matters. Forgive me for not accompanying you. After saying this, she turned around to leave. But Li Yunqin laughed. Leaving in such a hurry? Are you going to find priests yet? While talking, he took a step forward and reached out his hand to hold the door. The cabin was narrow, and it was a long and narrow rectangle. His hammock was on the side near the window, and the space on this side of the door could only allow two people to talk at most 2 steps away from each other. Now that he reached out his hand to hold the door, Pan he had nowhere to go. She turned around. She was very close to Li Yunqin, and they actually became intimate and domineering. Pan he was startled, but then she calmed down and smiled. What, after walking on the sea for so many days? Are you feeling lonely? Your young body may not be enough to satisfy me. Li Yunqin had turned into a young man, and he was not tall. But Pan he was considered tall among women, and so she was about the same height as Li Yunqin. Now that she said these words, it was like a beautiful young woman talking to a handsome young man, and it made the atmosphere in the cabin a bit lewd. He smiled coldly. Manager, you misunderstand. I just want to ask. At this point, Pan he suddenly reached out and grabbed his lower body. She still had a smile on her face. I also like young men like you. Li Yunqin immediately took a step back and said in a low voice, You want to die? 3 steel needles were inserted into the ground. They were the kind of horseshoe needles that women used for work, and they were as long as a finger. Now almost all of them were inserted into the wooden floor, and only the tip of the needle was exposed. If someone's mind wavered and was caught by her, he was afraid that he would die a painful death. But Pan he still smiled. Manager, what do you want to ask? If you don't want me to leave, I won't leave tonight. As she said this, she moved closer to Li Yunqin. A cold light flashed between her fingers. Li Yunqin looked at her with a cold face. You want to fight? That means Xiesheng is an important person to you. Why do you want to find him? I just want to tell him something. Pan he stopped. As if seeing that Li Yunqin did not stop her, she also stopped. She didn't want to cause more trouble. Manager, if you want to know, I can tell you. Tell him to go to Dragon Island and find trouble with Shinryu. Find trouble with Shinryu? Li Yunqin frowned. Why? Pan he was stunned. Then she slowly took a step back and carefully looked at Li Yunqin. Her face changed slightly. You are not the manager of East Sea Kingdom. Who are you? Li Yunqin was silent for a while. Then he raised his head and smiled. When did I admit that I am the manager of East Sea Kingdom? Little auntie, you think too highly of yourself. Pan he immediately raised her hand and did not say anything more. There was a buzzing sound in the air. and at least 20 steel needles shot towards Li Yunqin like a storm. After making this move, she pulled out a silver dagger from her hair bun and thrust it forward. Everything happened in an instant in this small cabin. No matter how skilled he was, he could not avoid it unless he broke through the porthole. But then he would fall into the sea. But there was a crisp sound. The steel needles twisted and fell to the ground. Pan He's knife and wrist were also twisted. The body of young Master Li in front of her was stronger than iron, and the strength of her wrist made her fracture. The master of the Freemasonry was shocked, but he did not hesitate. Knowing that he could not win, he immediately took out the grenade in his hand and was about to throw it to the ground. But this hand was suddenly grabbed by young Master Li's hand. She did not see how he moved. But in the end, the impact of their wrists colliding caused the extremely unstable grenade to explode. Green smoke immediately sizzled out of the grenade. Pan He subconsciously narrowed her eyes, ready to welcome the death she did not want, but could not do anything about. But she saw. Young Master Li snatched the grenade in her hand. He stuffed it into his mouth. Her eyes widened in horror, both because when he opened his mouth, he grinned from ear to ear, and because of the 2 rows of sharp, shining fangs in his mouth. But also because Li Yunqin closed his mouth and swallowed it. After 2 breaths he burped. There was a small flame accompanied by smoke, spitting out from his mouth, and quickly dissipating in the air. He turned to look at Pan He and laughed. It's a little hot, but it's satisfying. Now let's talk about Xiesheng and the manager of East Sea Kingdom. Chapter 599. Only then did Pan He realize that the person in front of her was not a human, but she could no longer move. An invisible force enveloped the entire room. She had walked right into the trap. Li Yunqin looked at her and smiled. As the person in charge of a country, your way of doing things is not rational or meticulous at all. From this we can see that your new Freemasonry is worse than before. My friend, you can't just do things on impulse and enthusiasm. You have to have a plan. Pan He opened her mouth and exhaled. Then he realized that he could still speak. With a trembling voice he asked, "What are you?" Hearing this, Li Yunqin blinked her eyes in surprise. He slowly took a step back and pointed at her from afar. "Ha, you're asking me what it is? So you've never seen a demon before? Oh, then what was your previous identity in the Freemasonry?" Pan He blinked her eyes nervously, as if her eyelids were twitching. I used to work in Huzhou. As expected, a small character who has just achieved success. Li Yunqin nodded in understanding. It seems that your association is short of talent. His tone was not small at all. All right, Pan He, it's good that you know fear. Next you will answer whatever I ask you, and you may not die. There are only so many people on this ship. It would be troublesome to kill you. However, Pan He was still hesitating. After hesitating for a while, she finally gathered her courage and said, "Even if you are a demon, don't you hate the rule of the dragons? You little demons, aren't you the same as mortals? You're enslaved and bullied by the dragons and other big demons." But she didn't know what she had said wrong. Suddenly, she saw a strange smile on young Master Li's face. He stopped talking. However, after some thought he said, "We can still work together. Just like with Mu Nanju. Since you can pretend to be a mortal, you must like the life in the human world." But the more she said so, the wider the smile on young Master Li's face became. Finally, the other party seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He waved his hand with a smile and was about to speak. At this moment, suddenly, a man came in through the porthole. Pan He's heart skipped a beat. She thought that the situation had changed. Perhaps it was the people from Southernwood House. But he was soon disappointed. The newcomer didn't seem to be human. Rather than drilling in through the porthole, it would be more accurate to say that it penetrated in. The porthole was like an illusion to him. This person was a tall young man, also dressed in white. However, his hair and clothes were all wet. As soon as he entered the cabin he shouted, "Strange. The waters were too deep. Guess what I saw?" As he spoke, he shook himself violently like an excited puppy. With a loud bang, the cabin was immediately filled with mist. How strong was he? Not only did he shake off the water on his body, he even blasted the air. Pan He took the full brunt of the blow, and blood immediately oozed from her eyes and ears. It was only then that the newcomer noticed Pan He and was slightly stunned. Li Yunxin sighed. You should be gentler. It wasn't easy for me to catch a fish. What if you kill it? Didn't I tell you to come in from under the ship? Someone saw you in my cabin during the day. But the ninth young master didn't take it seriously at all. He only paid attention to the word fish. He immediately became happy and walked to Pan He. He grabbed one of her arms and put it into his mouth. At the same time, he said to Li Yunxin, Haha, you must have something to ask of me. Otherwise, why would you give me blood food? Tell me, I won't refuse. Li Yunxin hurriedly said, Stop, it's not for you to eat. The ninth young master blinked and closed his mouth. But his sharp teeth had already pierced into Pan He's wrist, and a lot of blood gushed out. 3 breaths ago, Pan He was still trying to persuade Li Yunxin. But now, she was trembling all over and couldn't say a word. How many people in the world could stand such a scene? Watching herself being eaten alive. When I said big fish, it's just a metaphor. It's not a fish meat. Can you stop making trouble and go out to play again? Li Yunxin sighed. Whales and dolphins in the sea are also mammals. What's the difference between them and human flesh? Can't you go and eat them? The ninth young master blinked and didn't open his mouth. Instead, he quietly bit again. Immediately, there was a series of slight bone-cracking sounds. But Pan He didn't make a sound, either because she was brave or because she was scared out of her wits. The blood gushed out faster. The ninth young master swept the blood into his mouth with his bright red tongue. He said vaguely, oh, no, oh, let me think. Li Yunxin sighed. He stepped forward and pulled Pan He's wrist out of the ninth young master's mouth. The whole wrist had been bitten into pieces and became soft. If you suck all the blood, she will still die. This person is the ninth young master who is useful to me. Don't make trouble. The ninth young master curled his lips and licked his lips reluctantly. This taste is not bad. What do you want to do with her? Li Yunxin raised his hand and pressed a few acupoints on Pan He's arm to stop the bleeding. Nothing interesting. The ninth young master shouted angrily. You don't allow me to eat her, and you don't tell me. I want to hear it today. Li Yunxin looked at Pan He, whose face was as pale as a piece of paper. Then he looked at the ninth young master. In the end, he sighed again. Okay, she is a bad person. After I finish the interrogation, if she doesn't listen to me, I'll send her to you. Is that okay? The ninth young master thought for a while and nodded. That's reasonable. Ask me. I want to hear it. How bad is she? Li Yunxin snorted and looked at Pan He. What kind of bad idea? She has killed many people. The ninth young master blinked his eyes. You call this bad? I have eaten many people too. Li Yunxin looked at him helplessly. You are a demon. That's a little different. What's different? The ninth young master blinked his eyes again. Didn't you kill me before because I ate people? Maybe he was lonely these days because he didn't have anyone to talk to. Or maybe he was really tired today and just wanted to chat. He actually talked to Li Yunxin about this. But Li Yunxin didn't scold him like a subordinate. Shinryu wanted the ninth young master to go to Dragon Island. Besides, he was still useful. He could only smile bitterly. I didn't kill you before because you ate people. It was because I wanted to save my own life. It was for my own life. Oh, didn't this woman kill to save her own life? Of course not. Li Yunxin said patiently. She did it for something else. For money, fame, or an illusory belief, she killed many innocent people. The ninth young master became silent after hearing his words. Li Yunxin thought he had lost interest in this topic. So he turned around and wanted to ask Pan He again. But the ninth young master said again, That's no different. It's no different from you killing people to save your own life, or me eating people. When he said this, his tone became serious, which was rare. It was as if a philosophical thought had arisen on the sea, and they were about to have a good talk about killing people. Or maybe, it was because he died in Li Yunxin's hands before. He always felt that his death was not clear. Although it was over, he still couldn't figure it out. What did I do wrong? Li Yunxin's mind was clear. She could vaguely guess what he was thinking, so he was stunned for a while and shrugged. Okay, ninth young master, I will say it. Actually, the original intention is very important in this kind of thing. For example, a person doesn't have the intention to harm people, but someone infringes on his interests, such as life and property. So this person wants to protect these things that belong to him. So he fights back and kills people. Let's not talk about the laws of the world here. Then it is justified. This kind of legitimate power can be extended in Jianghu. Because you hurt me, there is hatred between us. Even if one thing is done, people will find you and kill you in the future. To a certain extent, it will be recognized by others. At least it is slightly more justified than killing people for no reason. As for demons, demons are not humans. Demons eating humans was no different from humans and livestock. There was nothing to criticize about it. For example, if the ninth young master didn't know me, it didn't matter to me who he ate. But after he recognized me, he ate the people around me and possibly me. That was a violation of my interests. So I had to find a way to save myself. So I killed you. Among men, it is a very proper thing to do. If I had killed you for fun without knowing you, it would have been a different matter. Do you understand all this? The ninth young master sat on the hammock and swayed slowly for a while. He frowned and said, I don't understand. Li Yunxin was stunned. What don't you understand? For example, I know you. For example, this woman is also your friend. I'm starving now. If I don't eat blood, I won't feel well. I want to eat this woman, but you won't let me. That means you'd rather see me feel sick. Aren't you violating me as well? For example, this woman killed many people she didn't know for fame and profit. But if those people don't die, she won't get fame and profit. If they don't die, aren't they violating her as well? Li Yunxin smiled helplessly. There is a line between violation and non-violation. It meant that you could make yourself feel comfortable, and you could get whatever you wanted. But you must not violate other people's interests. You are a demon. You want to eat people. People are like livestock to you. Then I won't talk about people. I'll talk about demons. Now the person you want to eat is raised by another demon. If you eat other people, does that mean other people don't have food to eat? If you eat my friend, does that mean I don't have any friends? So it's wrong. Ah, I see. The ninth young master frowned. It's troublesome when people are involved. Li Yunxin smiled. Yes. If chickens and ducks talk about equality and the right to life, people will also find it troublesome and hard to understand. Now does the ninth young master understand? The ninth young master was silent for a while. Then he suddenly said, It's still wrong. Li Yunxin sighed. What's wrong? The ninth young master looked at him seriously. There is no such thing as not violating others. For example, there are 100 people in the world. They are neither yours nor mine. If you eat one, there are only 99 left. But I can eat 100 of them. You think you are doing your own thing. But there are fewer people for me to eat. There are only so many good things in the world. If you use them, there will be fewer for me. For example, this woman asks people to give her money. If people give her money, there will be less for others. For example, if the people of this world believe in us, the dragon children, then everyone will believe in you. And the incense and wish power will all belong to you. But I will have less. We dragon son. Hearing this, Panhe suddenly opened her eyes wide, showing a look of disbelief and fear. What you said is the logic of the little people, not our logic. Otherwise, why don't the monster kings like others to expand their territories around them? Because even if they don't belong to them, if others take them away, they will have nothing left to take. Speaking of this, the ninth young master's eyes suddenly brightened. Yes, this is the logic of the little people. We are not little people. Li Yunxin knew what the ninth young master meant by little people. It referred to an insignificant character, an insignificant person in the marketplace. He also understood what the ninth young master meant. An ordinary person, with pitifully little power and influence. Living in a village or a city, the resources needed were also very limited. To him, the whole world was inexhaustible. When many of these people gathered together, they formed a human society. Everyone's needs were limited, so they only looked at the things around them. As long as the things around them were not taken away or taken from others, they would be safe. But for some people, for example, The emperor was not a little person. What they needed was territory and people. In their eyes, the world was like a cake that needed to be divided among a few ordinary people. Except for this cake, there was nothing else. If one person took it, there would be less for the other. A person would only be full after eating the whole cake. If he did not eat enough, he would be hungry forever. Under such circumstances, there was no such thing as not harming the interests of others. In other words, other people other than oneself were already harming oneself. He and the ninth young master were not little people. They were the apex predators that surpassed the ordinary people of this world, and even the ordinary demons. The Shinryu, the Rock King, and the Sage of Xianmen were all such predators. Because of this, the justice and truth of the ordinary world were not applicable here. For such existences, the existence of others was evil. To want the justice and truth of these people, the evil of existence must be eliminated. Only slaughter and elimination were their principles of justice and truth. When all the bystanders were eliminated and only one person was left, then all the evil would come to an end. For example, invading other countries was an evil act. But when there were no more other countries in the world, and everything belonged to the emperor, the evil act of invading would no longer exist. This was the justice of evil. Li Yunqin sighed. Yes, you are right. Between the ordinary people and the apex predators, there are two completely different systems of justice. But even the strongest person needs food, clothing, shelter, and transportation, and may be involved in the lives of the weak. When should the justice of the weak be applied? And when should the justice of the strong be applied? This is the fundamental problem. So we still need a standard, the dividing line between the two systems of justice. He paused and sighed again. I want to find this standard. He pointed at Pan He. Ninth young master, whether you eat her or not, it should be in the situation of the weak's justice. There are many people in this world, and you can't eat them all. I don't like you eating people, but this is your nature, and I don't want to harm you. So I suggest that the next time you want to eat someone, don't just grab them and eat them. There are so many evil people in this world, why not eat them? The ninth young master thought for a while and said, Then I still need to find out who are the evil people? Didn't you harm me again? Li Yunqin smiled. Yes. I am the one who harmed you again. But you actually tolerated this kind of harm for me. Ninth young master, this is called a friend. The new Lord Tongtian was stunned for a while, and then blinked his eyes. So, friends are like this? The new Lord Tongtian was stunned for a while, and then blinked his eyes. So, friends are like this? Yes, it is like this, Li Yunqin said. The ninth young master was silent for a while, and then frowned. I still need to think about it. He looked at Pan He, and licked his lips. Still need to think about it. Then he turned into a gust of wind, turned around, and slipped out of the porthole. Li Yunqin turned to look at Pan He. The girl's eyes were full of fear and surprise. He smiled. What's there to be afraid of? I don't eat people, at least not raw people. Now tell me, why did you ask Taoist Xia to find trouble with the Shinryu? And why do you think he has the ability to find trouble with the Shinryu? Chapter 600. Pan He's lips trembled slightly for a while before she asked weakly. Are you really? Dragon? Children? Li Yunqin stared at her helplessly for a while. His body suddenly shook and suddenly expanded. Pale green and slightly golden scales appeared on his limbs and cheeks. A snow-white mane and a pair of soaring horns also appeared. In the blink of an eye, his huge body reached the top of the cabin. The narrow cabin was filled with a terrifying pressure. Pan He's eyes were wide open, and her forehead was sweating profusely. She saw Long Sun lowering his head and getting closer to her, and some mist rising from the gaps of his scales. Did you see it clearly? Pan He could only blink her eyes to indicate that she understood. She couldn't even form a sentence. This majestic and terrifying Long Sun stared at her for a while. Then his body suddenly shrunk back, and he became a young boy again. Pan He's eyes rolled back, and she fainted. Li Yunqin snorted, raised his hand and slapped her face, and woke up the Freemasonry's new leader of the East Sea country. While watching her look of confusion that quickly turned into fear, he said coldly, People like you. Usually, when talking about the dragon sons, divine dragons, the general situation of the world, emperors and nobles, you can speak with confidence and composure. You are all people who regard fame and fortune as dirt, and you won't bat an eyelid even if you were to be attacked. But once the authority in your imagination is really in front of you, your courage will be smaller than anyone else, and you will kneel faster than anyone else. If today's Freemasonry is full of people like you, I'm afraid it will be over soon. He said sternly, Speak. Why do you think that priest Xie dares to look for trouble with the Shinryu? Although the last sentence was not loud, it was full of vigor. Panhe trembled in fear, and her mouth seemed to not listen to her as she blurted out. Because the elders in the association said, that person has the ability to resolve the world's calamity. With such ability, he wouldn't be afraid of the Shinryu. If he went to look for the Shinryu, the dragons might be heavily injured. Li Yunqin raised his eyebrows. How do you know he has such an ability? Didn't they say that person was Li Yunqin? Panhe blinked her eyes quickly. Sure enough, she told him everything she knew. Li Yunqin, that person, escaped after entering Cloudy Mountain. The elders said. Then he's not that person. We just intercepted the information from Munanju. We know there's such a Xiesheng. Who is the elder you're talking about? An elder of Cloud Mountain? No, it's the elders of the various sects in the past. Now they're elders. She was referring to the wandering souls that possessed the heads and heads of the various sections. After being abandoned by the elders of Cloud Mountain, she became an elder again. Unfortunately, the value of this elder was too low. She knew some details but couldn't see the whole picture. That's why she felt that she could instigate Xiesheng to look for the Shinryu. But on the other hand, he has the ability to resolve the world's calamity. This coincided with the conclusion that Li Yunqin had come to after observing and probing Xiesheng when she met him. That Xiesheng does have some secrets. A secret of utmost importance to Munanju and the Freemasons. In the past, those people thought that he had it. By now they should know. They know that he Li Yunqin is a fake crown prince. He had long anticipated this day. Thus, he had chosen the right side during the Battle of Cloud Mountain, finding many allies and forces for himself. Only then could he ensure his own safety. But he didn't know what those people in Munanju were feeling now. Li Yunqin laughed coldly. You're just a monkey in disguise. So when you find Xiesheng, what do you plan to tell him? I'll tell him that the Shinryu is the sky demon who came into the world. He wants to stop the calamity and kill the sky demon first. If he is really the person we are looking for, he will naturally believe it. Li Yunqin frowned. Anything else? Panhe's lips trembled violently. No, nothing else. Li Yunqin stared at her for a while. He was sure that this woman only knew this much, but his frown deepened. He knew that he was getting closer to a big secret. But the more clues and details he knew, the more confused and clueless he felt. For example, now he knew that Xiesheng was the person the Freemasons and Munanju were looking for. The reason why they were looking for him was that Xiesheng had a secret. The new elders of the Freemasons might have heard some rumors from the elders in Cloudy Mountain. So they thought that Xiesheng's secret could resolve the upcoming calamity. The calamity, when he met Grandpa D in Cloudy Mountain, Grandpa D said the same thing. At that time, Li Yunqin asked Grandpa D what the so-called calamity of the world was. Grandpa D told him, as if he was dealing with the natives of this world, that it was the invasion of the demonic realm. Li Yunqin hinted that he did not need to use these words to fool him. It was best to say it in words that everyone could understand. And this sentence seemed to reveal a flaw. Thus, Grandpa D quickly lost interest in him, knowing that he was not the person he was looking for. This meant that Xiesheng knew what the so-called calamity was, but the new elders of the Freemasons and the wandering souls did not know, and believed that the so-called calamity was the invasion of the demonic realm. So for the time being, looking at the problem from the perspective of the new elders, if Panhe told Xiesheng, the savior, that the Shinryu was the sky demon who came from the demonic realm, then Xiesheng would believe it. Xiesheng was not a fool. Why would he believe such words naturally after hearing them? Li Yunxin thought that this could only mean one thing. The Shinryu was related to the demonic realm. In other words, the origin of the Shinryu was related to the demonic realm. As long as he knew what the demonic realm was, he would know the origin of the Shinryu. Or in other words, if Xiesheng met the Shinryu, he would naturally get a huge amount of information. Then this step was really a wonderful coincidence. Xiesheng mistook the little demon protectorate as the organization he should go to. He also mistook the god of Shinryu as the person he was looking for, and thus went straight to Dragon Island. And when the idiots of the Freemasons saw Xiesheng's actions, they felt that it was more evidence of the inside story that they knew. Thus, they planned to push Xiesheng again, to make him believe that the Shinryu was the Sky Demon's invasion. But they did not know that what Xiesheng was thinking was completely different from what they were thinking. Thinking of this, Li Yunxin took a deep breath. Fortunately, he set this up in time. Just in time he lured the Freemasons out. Otherwise, if this woman really went to meet Xiesheng later on, with Xiesheng's intelligence, he would have realized that something was wrong. Maybe he would have immediately turned around and returned to land. Because of this, he let out a light breath. Pacing around the narrow cabin, he stretched out his hand to push Pan He's limp wrist, and said regretfully, "You were so sensible and sensible before. Why did you have to suffer like this? Then tell me, where is the nest of the Freemasons now?" Pan He's face was already getting paler. When demons fought, it was not a big deal for them to get injured, bleed, or even break an arm or a leg. But for mortals, having their wrist bitten off was indeed extremely painful. She seemed to be eager to get rid of this pain. Her lips trembled as she said incoherently, In the former heavenly grotto heaven." Li Yunxin grunted and asked, "The heavenly grotto heaven where the 36 heavenly grotto heaven and the 72 sects are located?" "Yes. There's the book you mentioned before and also grenades." "Yes." "Ah." Li Yunxin smiled. "Wonderful. Why didn't I think of it earlier? Brother Pheasant." Immediately, another figure emerged from the wall. Pheasant appeared beside Li Yunxin and said uneasily, "Dragon King. You're flattering me by calling me that." Li Yunxin waved his hand. "You heard it. These days, use the treasure I gave you to restrain your demon aura, and keep an eye on Xiesheng from a distance. If anyone touches him, take him down immediately." Pheasant cupped his fists, yes. After saying this, he didn't leave. He knew Li Yunxin's mind, so he waited for him to deal with Pan He. Li Yunxin walked a few steps beside Pan He and said, "Have you killed anyone?" Pan He seemed to know that it was a matter of life and death after all. She gritted her teeth. "No." Li Yunxin was stunned, and then laughed. "No? When you attacked me just now, it didn't look like you hadn't killed anyone before." "I only hurt people, not kill people," Li Yunxin snorted. "You keep talking about the world trend, but you don't dare to kill people. Your society is really doomed." After saying this, he waved his hand. Pan He immediately collapsed to the ground. She regained control of her body. However, the pain and fear made her unable to control her whole body, and she couldn't recover for a while. "Take her back," Li Yunxin said to Pheasant. "Use the spell I taught you to erase what happened tonight from her mind." But Pheasant hesitated for a moment. "Dragon King, won't you kill her?" Li Yunxin turned to look at him and stared at him. "Do I look like a homicidal maniac?" Pheasant shrank his neck and thought for a while. He felt that the answer to this question from Li Yunxin should be yes. There were many cultivators, demons, and mortals who died in his hands. But he didn't have the courage to say it, so he said, "I think it's troublesome to keep her." Pan He shrank against the wall and looked at Li Yunxin with wide eyes. Dragon King, please forgive me. I won't go against you anymore. And I won't get involved in these things anymore." You can't believe her words. Dragon King. Pheasant glanced at her. "It's better to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots." Li Yunxin sighed and patted Pheasant on the shoulder. "Where does such a strong murderous aura come from? We'd better win people over by virtue go." Seeing that Li Yunxin had made up his mind, Pheasant also sighed. He lifted Pan He up and went out by climbing over the wall. About a quarter of an hour later, he came back, frowning at Li Yunxin. "Dragon King, I sent her back. But Even if I erase the memory of tonight, she will still remember you. It's still a big problem. I can't figure it out. In fact, this demon was a little worried. After his Dragon King and Lu Laodao went to Qing Kingdom and came back, he changed a little. When in Li Si's yard, Pheasant was slightly aware of it, but he didn't quite understand. Tonight, he finally realized what was going on. He felt that his king had become a little kind and a little soft-hearted. Even now, his Dragon King was definitely more decisive and resolute than most people. However, he was afraid that if this change continued slowly, one day it would become bad. For example, now he actually spared some manager of the Freemasonry. In the past, this kind of person could not be killed with a raise of the hand. This made the Pheasant feel very worried. Li Yunqin returned to the hammock and stretched her body. She said in a drawn-out voice, "Trouble. What I want is trouble. Now we have found out the manager of the Freemasonry. But there is still the shopkeeper of Mu Nanju on the ship. I don't ask you to kill her because she is bait. When we are at sea, of course we have to fish. Besides, what's the rush?" Speaking of this, his tone slowly became cold. "Do you know what I have been doing these days?" Pheasant blinked. From Li Yunqin's tone, he felt a certain familiarity, a certain coldness hidden under the calm surface. But this coldness calmed him down and made him feel at ease. Dragon King has been telling people's fortunes these days. Humph. Li Yunqin snorted. Yes, he has been telling for a few days. What did he find out? There are more than 200 people on this ship, except for a dozen merchants. The rest of the sailors are not good people. They have killed many people, and rape and theft are even more common. Just last night, there were 6 groups of people discussing how to rob and burn the ship. These 6 groups don't even know each other. This time, Lu Baishui has suffered a big setback. Someone is trying to harm him. The Pheasant was a little confused. It wasn't that he didn't know who was trying to harm Lu Baishui. He just didn't know why his Dragon King spent so much effort on this person. He was just a mortal. It must be the governor who is trying to harm him. These people might also be released from prison. Otherwise, how could there be so many of them in just a few days? Speaking of this, Li Yunqin stretched himself and exhaled. But he is a hero of the Stormy Waves Road. He has traveled all over the world and has seen so much. But now, he has suffered a setback because of this matter. His IQ has dropped too fast. Tell me, is this normal? Pheasant was a smart monster. But if a smart person didn't have enough experience, he would also be stupid sometimes. Therefore, when Li Yunqin said these words, his brain couldn't keep up. He didn't know what the Dragon King meant. He could only say, a yes. Is this normal? Li Yunqin glanced at him and laughed. Of course it's not normal. Lu Baishui is not a fool. Of course he can see it. But even so, he still has to go to sea. Before we set sail, I talked to him for a while on the ship. I told him bluntly that he was no longer the main character on this trip. The fleet had become Xiesheng's. And I have some enmity with Xiesheng. And it's not a mortal enmity. Before, he was willing to take me to sea, because he also wanted to go overseas and see the world. Besides, we hit it off. But that day, things were completely out of control. If he went with the ship again, he would probably die. He is a hero of the martial arts world with a family and a business. He also knew that his country's governor wanted to deal with him. So he went to sea with me. Pheasant, tell me, is this normal? Pheasant could only blink. So Li Yunqin smiled again and closed his eyes. Go. I need some sleep. Chapter 601. The next day was sunny. The vast and distant sky was as blue as the vast and distant sea. Wisps of white clouds floated in the sky, and the sea breeze became gentle. Strangely, it seemed that the further east they went, the warmer it was. When the people on the 2 ships set out, it was bitterly cold on the shore. But now, they could take off their clothes and go out on the deck to bask in the sun. There were more than 200 people on the big ship, and many of them knew how to work with wood. Li Shaoxian found a carpenter early in the morning and asked him to make a chair for him. There were ready-made wood on the ship, and he paid a good price and was popular. Naturally, work was done quickly. Therefore, at noon, he was half lying in the bow of the boat. Actually, he was making a beach chair. He put a small stool next to the chair and put tea and food on the stool. The wind was calm, the ship was big, and the water was deep. So at this time, it was almost no different from flat ground. The sun was shining, and the sea breeze was blowing. It was a very comfortable environment. Some people were fishing by the side of the ship, not caring if they could catch anything. Some people were casting nets at the stern. This ship used to be a pirate ship, but pirates often worked as fishermen, so it could be a warship or a fishing boat. There was also a group of people around Li Shaoxian, talking to him. Actually, he wanted to find a god to ask him about his luck. But the god also had a temper. He said he was too tired and didn't want to see anything today. But although he didn't look at fate, his words were interesting. When he was excited, he would make an exception. Anyway, this group of people had nothing to do, and talking to him was a relief. The merchant Wu Jiasong also came up with his wife, but his wife didn't get out of bed and broke her hand last night. She didn't look good. She and Wu Jiasong stood by the side of the ship, looking over, but didn't come over. Wu Jiasong seemed very happy. Although his wife's hand was like cutting out his heart, he was happy that he didn't have to mingle with those idlers. It was like drinking hot water alone, hot and comfortable. When he was happy, he became generous. She stopped the peddler who was selling snacks on the deck. She picked up a few of the snacks and wrapped them in her clothes. She teased her wife to eat them one by one. Pan he frowned and took a bite of everything. She said that she was not feeling well and did not eat anymore. Wu Jiasong pitifully ate the rest, not even sparing the dregs between his fingers. Even if Pan he had something on her mind, she still frowned when she saw him like this. But in the end, there was no other way. It had been like this for more than 10 years. There were people around Li Yunxin who knew about Wu Jiasong. Seeing him like this, he decided to bring his story to Li Shaoxian, hoping that he would be happy enough to let him have a look. He used to have a big business. Didn't he have any assets under his name? Gambling houses, restaurants, inns, there were even 2 copper mines. 10 years ago, I still ran with him on the road to the capital, ate and slept together. He was lucky enough to climb up to a high branch in the capital. Just like that, he became rich. The one who spoke was also a peddler. From the looks of it, he was just a peddler. He must have been very unsuccessful. But now, because he was once familiar with Wu Jiasong, he was proud. He said in an unconcerned tone. Unfortunately, he failed in a few years. That official in the capital fell. And he didn't have a good time either. The money he earned for 4 or 5 years was all spent. His previous property was also gone. With that, he returned to our Stormy Waves Road. I started from the beginning. That's how I ended up with this problem. When the money is in my hands, I always feel that it doesn't belong to me. I try to save as much as I can. I don't know where he hid it. That little wife of his. He bought it when he went back to the Bien. I was in the Bien at that time. I also invited him to drink twice. And the result? He became rich again and forgot about me. Sigh, rich people are busy and forgetful. When he said this, a group of people laughed and jeered, asking him to talk to Wu Jiasong. Otherwise, they wouldn't believe that they knew each other. Li Yunxin also laughed with the group, but he was thinking about something else. It was the same as before. This peddler mentioned Wu Jiasong's background in front of Li Yunxin, thinking that he remembered it himself and said it casually. But in fact, it was Li Yunxin who asked him to say it. He himself didn't notice the subtle guidance and hints. Because although Pan he was useless, since he could be in charge of a country in this new Freemasonry, he should have had some weight in the past. Such a person, lurking around Wu Jiasong for so many years, for what? It was possible that he was just using his money and connections to inquire. Or he might have a more direct purpose. But after listening to this group of people talk for so long, Li Yunxin felt that the latter was not very likely. He let out a light breath, picked up the teacup beside him, and took a sip, then said casually, "Strange. The further east we go, the warmer it gets." The peddler just now was anxious to get away from the teasing of the crowd, and immediately said, "Young Masterly, is this the first time you went east?" Young Masterly coughed. "Yes. I used to go west with my father. It wasn't because my father was willing to go. My father has a relative in the Tocharian kingdom in the west. He's my distant uncle. Sigh. He forced us to go there to play. Actually, there's nothing fun in the west. Barbarian land. But there's no way. My uncle is a third-rank official in the Tocharian kingdom. Everyone knew that this was the first time young Master Li went out to sea in the east. After so many days, they had already understood this young master's temper. If he was good at something and experienced something, he would not be stingy to show it to others. If someone mentioned something he didn't know or experienced, he would immediately change the topic and start to brag about how he used to be with his father. But he was a young man after all, and he did have some ability, so they didn't hate him. Seeing him like this now, they could only laugh in their hearts. But they still said, yes, yes. After all, the East is a little different from the West. Young Master Li knows that in about a day or two, we will reach the chain of the East Sea. After saying these 3 words, he saw Li Yunxin's face show a little doubt, so he smiled. The chain of the East Sea refers to the islands in the East Sea. It's considered the border that our East Sea country can manage. There are nearly 100 islands of various sizes. This time, our merchant group is going there. He then lowered his voice. I heard that the owner of the ship, Boss Lu, wants to go further east in the chain of the East Sea to find the Dragon Island. After we disembark, they still have to continue to the east. When he said this, someone seemed to not like him showing off like this, so he sneered. In a day or two, Brother Wang, I'm afraid you've forgotten about Aquarius Bay and that Sea King Lu Fei. When these words came out, the people who were talking and laughing just now were stunned for a moment, and all of them quieted down at the same time. It was said that the sea bandit Lu Fei's lair, Aquarius Bay, was between the chain of the East Sea and the mainland. If they were unlucky, they might really encounter it. These people also knew about it. These 2 ships used to be Lu Fei's ships. Chapter 602. This kind of thing was bad luck. Many people on the sea were superstitious, so after a moment of silence, they all spat and scolded that person for being a jinx. They quickly changed the topic and let it go, but after chatting for a while, they were eventually bored by that person, and they slowly went their separate ways. The person who was showing off to Li Yunxin was about to leave, but he was pulled back by Li Yunxin. Hey? Where are you going? You haven't told me. Why is it warmer the further east we go, the warmer it is? This person was like young Master Li, after all, and he really liked to show off. He was about to leave. Hearing this question, he raised his eyebrows and squatted down again. A reserved smile appeared on his face. Young Master Li is proficient in metaphysics, but you don't know this. Oh, that's easy. Young Master, think about it. Heaven and earth, Qian Kuan Yin and Yang. They all have differences, right? Our land is Kuan, heavy and nourishing all things, which is pure Yin and Yang. But the land is heavy, and the sea is the opposite. It is like the sky, and should be Yang. Since one is Yin and the other is Yang, there must be differences. So in winter, it is cold on the land and warm in the water. The further east we go, the more water there is, and the warmer it is. This world was different from Li Yunxin's previous world. In his previous world, there were also theories like Yin and Yang and 5 elements, but it had always been outside the mainstream scientific system. There were very few people who believed in it. Even those who often talked about it were only saying it casually. In his previous world, the theory of Yin and Yang and 5 elements could solve some problems, but most problems could not be solved, or could not be solved for the time being. But here, the way of Yin and Yang seemed to be the mainstream. This peddler used Yin and Yang to explain the difference between land and sea. At first glance, it sounded reasonable, and it also matched the actual situation. But the problem was that the water under Li Yunxin was also water in his previous world. He knew that there was another way to explain it. The specific heat capacity of water was higher. In winter, the temperature along the coast was slightly higher, but it couldn't be so high. But it could not have been so high. They had gone straight to the east, and there was a compass on the boat. The latitude didn't change, but the longitude did. Logically, the temperature should have risen slightly, but it shouldn't have been so obvious. After nearly 10 days at sea, The temperature had risen by at least 10 degrees. At this point it was already above zero. As he thought of this, he heard the merchant laugh again. I heard that if you go further east, it'll be like summer. It was a vast and boundless fog, and he couldn't see the front anymore. If we pass through that fog, we will arrive at the edge of the sky, the residences of the celestial emperors. In other words, the Dragon Island and the Immortal Mountain are both in the fog, he asked. The merchant smiled. That's right. The immortals are separated from us by the fog. Without great magic power, you won't be able to pass through. At this point he waved his hand. Li Yunxin nodded. Goddess Penglai was sucked into the talisman. Over the past few days, he often interrogated her in the dead of night. The demon said some things in bits and pieces, but Li Yunxin did not know if they were true or false. So these days, he casually asked the people on the ship like before, confirming Goddess Penglai's words. This time it was printed. The demon previously said that Mount Penglai was in the thick fog, so they couldn't tell the direction. She also said that the Dragon Island was also in the thick fog, appearing and disappearing from time to time. She also said that the 4 seasons were like early summer, and the further east, the hotter it was. Li Yunxin felt it was absurd, so he asked this question. He didn't expect the demon to be telling the truth. This was very strange. While they were talking, they suddenly heard the people at the side and the stern of the ship making noise. The people at the side of the ship were fishing, and the people at the stern were releasing the nets. It was originally a happy scene, but now, they were hurriedly retrieving the fishing gear, as if something terrible had happened in the sea. Li Yunxin also stood up. Seeing that the merchant was stunned, he whispered, "Could it be the ceiling?" When he said this, there was some kind of blank fear in his tone. It was the first time he saw him like this. Li Yunxin frowned. "What ceiling?" The merchant ignored him. After being stunned for a while, he suddenly turned around and ran into the cabin, not even in the mood to show off. He could only walk to the side of the ship and look down. Sure enough, he saw the ceiling that the merchant mentioned. This name was very appropriate. In the dark blue sea, there was a line. It looked about the thickness of a person's forearm, and it was extremely long. Next to the side of the ship, it extended from the bow to the stern. Li Yunxin's eyesight was better than the people on the ship. Therefore, he could see it very clearly. This thing looked white, but in fact it should be translucent. It was about 1 or 2 feet under the water, so it could be considered floating. But it was just floating, it really looked like a line. He didn't notice anything unusual about this thing. According to his thinking, it should be some kind of unknown sea creature. It should be a plant since it could grow so long. However, there must be a reason for the people on the ship to panic like this. He only looked at the side of the ship for a few seconds, and someone behind him said, "Young Master Li, don't look, this thing is highly poisonous. Don't get splashed by the waves." For a moment, Li Yunxin didn't understand the connection between the poison and the waves. But soon he understood. He wasn't the only one on the ship who was at sea for the first time. A dozen steps away, there were 2 men also looking down from the side of the ship. They looked like scholars, but their eyesight wasn't very good. Plus, the ship was very tall, so they tried their best to get down. It was useless, it was just a psychological comfort. But they weren't familiar with the people on the ship, so no one stopped them. At this moment, the ceiling on the side of the ship slightly trembled. This slightly was relative to the length of the thing. With Li Yunxin's eyesight, he couldn't see how long it was from the bow to the stern, so it must be terrifyingly long. For such a long thing, even if it trembled in a very small way, the force was still very strong. Boom. It was as if hundreds of thousands of them had rushed up from the bottom of the water, and the side of the ship splashed high. This wave was not enough to cross the side of the ship and hit the first class. But some of the water splashed on people. Someone shouted at Li Yunxin, but he didn't touch him. The 2 scholars on the side of the ship, however, had their faces splashed. The seawater was bitter and astringent, and it seemed to hurt their eyes. The 2 hurriedly shrank back, turned their heads, and raised their hands to wipe their faces with their sleeves. At this moment, they heard a few people who were slightly closer almost at the same time say, "Don't move. Don't wipe. Don't touch. Aya." But it was too late. They just raised their hands and wiped. It was like changing faces in a play. The two people's faces were blurred. It was as if the two people's faces were made of sugar paste. And now the heat was gone and it melted. The skin on their faces drooped, and their eyelids drooped, looking extremely terrifying. Seeing the two of them like this, the people around them gasped. The two people didn't seem to notice the abnormality on their faces at all, and even made a strange huh sound, because their eyelids drooped, and their vision was a little blurred. They thought there was a problem with the seawater entering their eyes, so they wiped again. At this moment, two bloodied faces fell onto the deck with two clattering sounds. The two people's faces were wiped off just like that. Their bloody facial bones and two bloody eyeballs were exposed. Everyone finally cried out in fear. With such a cry, the four eyeballs lost their support and drooped down. The two scholars didn't seem to feel the pain, but they also felt that something was wrong, and reached out to touch their faces. At this time they could no longer see. With one touch, they touched their own facial bones and their own eyeballs. After a moment of shock, they immediately let out a high-pitched scream, and fell to the ground with a thud. Blood gushed out, quickly covering their entire faces, and then gathered into a puddle on the deck. One of them was so frightened that he lost his mind. He turned around and grabbed the side of the ship, flipped over, and fell into the sea. Usually, when a wound was soaked in salt water, the pain was excruciating, not to mention his face in the sea. Immediately, he let out a scalp-numbing scream, but it only lasted for a moment before it stopped. The seawater only splashed a few drops on his face, and it melted, not to mention that his whole body was submerged in the sea. The remaining scholar rolled on the ground. Everyone avoided him, for fear of being splashed by his blood. With this commotion, a few officers and soldiers ran out of the cabin. Seeing this person, they were shocked and asked, "What's going on?" Then, Xiesheng, who had stayed in the cabin for a few days, also walked out. This was the first time Li Yunqin saw him after they parted in the mountain village. Li Yunqin could sense this person's aura in the cabin, but he didn't see his face. Now that he looked at him, he realized that his appearance had changed. Although his skin was still slightly dark, it was slightly whiter. He seemed to have grown a bit, and his shoulders were wider. He had stayed in the mountains for more than 10 years, so his skin was dark and rough. It was fine to say that his appearance was average, but it wasn't too much to say that he was ugly. But now, he had completely gotten rid of the evaluation of being ugly, because his realm had increased. Looking at his aura, he should be in the emptiness realm. Once in the emptiness realm, a person would be reborn. In the past, Lu Gongzan looked like Lao Dao, with gray hair at his temples. But after entering the emptiness realm, his hair and beard turned black again, because he had a longer lifespan and regained his youth. Xiesheng was naturally young, so his body became strong. It was hard for a person with a good figure to not look good. Coupled with the well-tailored clothes he was wearing, he could be considered a talented person. This guy did look like a main character. Once he escaped from the mountain that had confined him for more than 10 years, he immediately caused a lot of trouble. When he first entered the world, he had nothing. Now he became a guest of the governor of the Stormy Waves Road of the East Sea Nation. And he also kidnapped 100 soldiers and 2 huge warships. At the same time, he also relied on the shallow cultivation method that Li Yunqin gave him to cultivate to such a level in just a dozen days. This kind of talent and cultivation was really terrifying. But the spiritual qi in the world was already chaotic. Naturally, Xiesheng couldn't cultivate like the previous cultivators. He must have had the help of spiritual medicine. Li Yunqin guessed that the reason he went to the governor's office to play tricks was because there were spiritual items in the governor's office. This wasn't strange. All the officials and nobles in the secular world would have some treasures hidden in their homes. In the past, Daotong and Kinzo had residences in every major city, so it wasn't strange for them to befriend each other. But now, maybe this Xiesheng had used up all of his spiritual items and wanted to improve, so he wanted to see if there was anything on Dragon Island that he could cultivate with. When he walked out, he looked calm and steady. When the soldiers saw him, they hurriedly saluted and lowered their voices. Li Yunxin could see that the soldiers respected this Taoist Xie from the bottom of their hearts. This kid was really good at winning people's hearts. So he asked what was going on. Seeing that this young Taoist Xie Sheng had a kind attitude, someone told him. Xie Sheng understood immediately, but he didn't go to the side of the ship first. Instead, he looked at the scholar who was rolling on the ground, his face full of pity. Why didn't anyone save him? Just leave him like this? The sailors explained that this kind of person's blood was also poisonous. The Selene's poison was terrifying. Once it appeared in the sea, the surrounding tens of miles of sea would have this kind of poison. Just a little bit of it would cause the flesh and blood to melt. If anyone else touched the blood of the poisoned person, they would end up the same. It had to be after the Selene disappears. And after 6 to 8 hours, this kind of strange poison would also disappear. This thing wasn't common, but it wasn't rare either. If a person traveled 10 or so times a year, they would definitely see it once. As long as they didn't disturb it, it would be fine as long as they stayed far away. Who asked these two scholars to court death? What could other people do? Xie Sheng heard this, frowned and thought for a while. He sighed softly. Even so, letting him suffer like this isn't a solution. He stretched his hand to the side. Give me the knife. After the bodyguard boarded the ship, he took off his armor and only wore cloth armor. He didn't bring his long knife, only a short knife. He hurriedly took out the short knife from his waist and gave it to Xie Sheng. Xie Sheng held the knife and looked at the scholar, who was rolling on the ground. He couldn't bear it anymore and sighed twice before saying, "Help him free." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand, and a short knife shot out with a buzzing sound. It went right into the scholar's forehead and nailed his head to the ground. This person's body twitched and twitched a few times. Then he stopped moving. Everyone was shocked by his decisive action and quietened down. Xie Sheng walked out of the crowd with his hands behind his back and sighed again. What a bitter life. He waved his sleeves. A whirlwind swept the corpse and the blood on the deck into the sea, leaving not a single trace on the ship. Everyone saw this scene, and naturally felt that it was miraculous. They had long heard that there was a Taoist priest on the ship, who went out to sea to search for the Celestial Mountain and Dragon Island. Now that they saw this, they knew that he was indeed a deity. Thus, no one surrounded Li Yunxin anymore. They all went to talk to this deity. Compared to little deity Li, this deity was the real deal. Li Yunxin took advantage of the time when the group of people surrounded deity Xie to walk to the side of the ship and carefully looked into the sea. He quietly took a few steps back. Leaning against the side of the ship, he stretched out a finger and gently wiped it. He put it into his mouth and slowly sucked for a while coldly looking at Xie Sheng and the group of people. People couldn't see small and fast things, but he could. The scholar was rolling on the ground. Although he was far away, a drop of blood still splashed further and landed on the side of the ship. He tasted this thing and then turned his head to look into the sea. He didn't know when the Selene had disappeared. It seemed to have gone back into the deep waters. Chapter 603. He took 2 steps back to avoid the crowd. But just as he turned to the front of the ship, he made a soft hiss sound. There was some itchiness in his mouth. This feeling was both familiar and strange, making him startled for a moment. In his previous life, he didn't eat well. It was considered a blessing to be able to eat for a certain period of time, but he couldn't pursue balanced nutrition. Thus, mouth ulcers were common, and his grandfather said it was because of internal heat. When the season changed, or if he was lucky enough to eat some fried food, he would feel his mouth and throat were slightly dry and itchy the next day. After another day, it would hurt a little. The next 2 or 3 days would be the process of the pain, and itch reaching its peak. And it would take another 4 or 5 days to recover. Although he was smart when he was young, he had limited access to knowledge. He believed his grandfather's words, thinking that it was because of the season changed, or because it was hot or cold. When he grew up, he learned more, and knew that eating fried food would cause internal heat and pain, or eating too many oranges would cause internal heat and pain. Perhaps it was because the surface of the fried food was hard. It was crispy when eaten, but eating too much would cause damage to the oral mucosa. If the injury was severe, there would be ulcers, The same was true for oranges. Too much acid would stimulate the mucosa, and it would also cause damage. However, this kind of thing was quite controversial even in his previous world. The reason why he was startled today was because he had been cultivating since he was young, and his body was strong, and he paid attention to diet and health. Thus, he had almost never experienced the taste of ulcers. Now that he had the body of dragons, he would not have such small injuries. Thus, now that he felt a familiar feeling in his mouth, many of the past hidden deep in his heart would come out, making him feel inexplicably complicated. There were very few people like him who had lived 2 lives. There were even fewer people like him who had lived a thrilling and magnificent life. On such a strange ocean, he experienced the emotions of his previous life in an unexpected way. It was also a wonderful thing. But the problem was, the poison in this drop of blood could actually sting his mouth. He ate Panhe's grenade. Apart from feeling a little choking, he felt fine. It was like drinking hard liquor in his previous life. And when the liquor entered his stomach would warm up. But now he was hurt by this thing. The poison was really incredible. Li Yunxin stood there with a slight frown. He smacked his lips as if he was tasting a fine wine, and felt that the pain seemed to have lessened a little. This was probably all the poison could do. But at this moment he felt someone looking at him. So he looked up. Lu Baishui was on the 2nd floor of the ship. When he saw him, he smiled and said, "Young Master Li, I heard that you can predict fortune and misfortune. Come up and calculate for me. What do you think?" She was looking for him for something. He looked at Xiesheng. All right. There were more than 200 people on the ship, and it was a mess. There were quite a number of people coming and going on the deck. He would not attract any attention if he went up. There was only one person to pay attention to. It was Panhe. Panhe's memory of last night was erased by the pheasant. She must feel strange. A perfectly fine person's wrist was broken, but she couldn't remember what happened. She must feel something was wrong. He didn't know what kind of spiritual medicine she had. But she didn't seem to feel much pain, even after applying a thick layer of it on her wrist. Wherever Li Yunxin went, her gaze followed him from afar. But he didn't care. He went straight to the 2nd floor, stood by the railing with Lu Baishui, and looked down. Xiesheng was giving orders to several guards. Those sergeants listened and nodded repeatedly. A group of people surrounded him in awe, listening to his words as if they were listening to celestial music. If it were me, I would also kill them. Lu Baishui looked at Xiesheng and others and said in a low voice, "If they can't be saved, they will suffer for nothing. When I was in Jianghu, I often encountered such things. Sometimes they were good brothers who went through life and death together. But something happened, and there was nothing I could do. I could only bear the pain and cut my wrist. Brotherly, don't you think so?" Li Yunxin looked at him strangely. "Brother Lu, why do you suddenly say this?" Lu Baishui turned his eyes to the sea. There was another ship in the distance. The visibility was good today, and people on the deck of the Haitsong could see it clearly. The Haitsong was full of supplies for their eastward journey, and it had been sailing on the starboard side of the Haitsong. Usually, they used small boats and speedboats to communicate on the sea, because we will reach the chain of the East Sea in a day or 2. Lu Baishui narrowed his eyes. After unloading the goods and people in the chain of the East Sea and resupplying, Brotherly will go further east. Alas, the sea is not peaceful. For example, today is a beautiful day, and someone suddenly died. I don't know how many things will happen in the future. Li Yunxin furrowed her brows even more tightly. There was a hidden meaning in Lu Baishui's words, and only a fool couldn't understand it. It would be boring to pretend to be calm. He said, "Brother Lu, what do you want to say?" Lu Baishui looked at the sea, and was silent for a while, then turned to look at him. His expression was very solemn. "A few days ago, Brotherly said that you would disguise yourself and go down to investigate Taoist Xie's movements. Now, how is the investigation going?" Li Yunxin thought for a while and looked at him. She looked back at him and said, "I found someone suspicious. In my heart, I also had some plans. Brother Lu, do you want to hear it?" "Which one?" Li Yunxin stretched out his hand and pointed at Panhe. "This woman." Pan He had been observing him in the dark, but now he was pointing at her. She was shocked for a moment. After a while, she hurriedly lowered her head, pretending that nothing had happened, and hurriedly walked away. Wu Jiasong didn't seem to know what was going on, so he chased after her. Lu Baishui was slightly stunned. It was as if he thought that Li Yunxin was pointing at someone else. But now he was pointing at Pan He, so he couldn't help but be surprised. Li Yunxin asked, "Brother Lu, did you find anything?" Lu Baishui was silent for a while, then sighed heavily. "Okay. Now that things have come to this, Brother Li, I won't hide it from you. I want to do something." Li Yunxin said with a smile. "Brother Lu, please say it." "I want to get rid of Taoist Xia and his 100 bodyguards." Lu Baishui stared at Li Yunxin with bright eyes. "Brother Li is also a cultivator. If you have a conflict with him, can you protect yourself?" Li Yunxin thought for a while. "I can try. I can only protect myself. But why do you want to do it now?" Lu Baishui let out a sigh. "Because we are almost at the East Sea chain." After saying this, he turned around. He put his hands on the railing and patted it. "I gathered these people on board, so I naturally arranged my own spies. Brother Li, you know that these people are not good people. I am afraid that something will happen, so I can only do this. These days, I know one thing. Taoist Xia's people are going to do it. On the day when we arrive at the East Sea chain. When we arrive there, as soon as our 2 ships stop, they will attack from both sides with the local government and take down the 2 ships. After all, we are overseas. Because of my identity, they may not be able to do it in the inland. But when we are overseas, it is easy to kill them. If I die in the East Sea chain, it will only be a shipwreck. These are the news that my people have given me these days. I originally thought that Taoist Xia would not cause any trouble and let them stay on the ship. But since they have such an idea, I can't just sit and wait for death. I can only fight to the death." Li Yunxin softly said, "Oh," as if he was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he said, "Brother Lu, if you have such an idea, the government must be prepared. If they are well-trained soldiers, I am afraid that even 200 people on the ship are no match for them. Brother Lu, what do you plan to do?" Lu Baishui said in a low voice, "Of course I have my ways. Alas, Brother Li." After saying this, he wanted to say something but stopped. After hesitating for 2 or 3 breaths, he seemed to have finally made up his mind. "Brother Li, just like how you hid something from me, I also have something to hide from you. Based on our identities and positions, we should not be friends. But fate makes fools of people. I actually think that we are congenial and can be friends. Actually, I am. Saying this, he did not continue. He patted the railing hard. "Hey! Anyway, I will not harm you." Li Yunxin was silent for a while, finally shook his head and smiled. "If that is the case, if Brother Lu did not say it, I would pretend not to know. But now that I have said it, how can I pretend not to know? Brother Lu." As he said this, he suddenly heard the people below the ship and on the deck making noise again. Suspecting that the ceiling had appeared again, he looked up. But he found that the height song had become shorter. This was his first impression. Looking closely, he found that it was not shorter, but had changed direction. The height song was on the right side of the height song. At this time, the height song had changed direction and was heading straight for the height song. Both of them were huge ships. In order to avoid disturbances in the water, they were far away from each other. Today the sky was clear, and the people on the deck could be seen clearly. A few days ago, there was some fog on the sea, so they could only see the outlines. But although the distance was far, if the height song were to come here at full speed, it would only take a little more than a quarter of an hour for the 2 ships to touch each other. This kind of 3-masted ship sailed mainly by the sea wind. But there were oars too, huge blades sticking out from the stern, 3 on each side. Usually, they were kept in the belly of the ship, and only put down when manpower was needed. Each blade was driven by 10 people. Human power was transmitted to the blades through a complex gear structure, pushing the ship forward. But they could only play a supporting role. This was so that if they were unlucky and encountered a sea where there was no wind for several days, they could slowly row out of the ship. Now, The 6 blades at the stern of the Haitsong had been put down, and they were flying up and down with all their might to make the ship move faster. When the people on the deck of the Haitsong saw the Haitsong coming this way, they started to clamor, wondering what it was doing and whether it was going to deliver something. But after being noisy for a while, they all realized one thing. If the Haitsong and the Haitsong did not turn and maintain their current speed, in the end, the Haitsong would crash into the belly of the Haitsong. It was unbearable for 2 fishing boats to collide like this, let alone 2 huge ships. They were once pirate warships, and they had a collision angle. What was worse was that the sealing had just disappeared. This meant that for at least 4 hours, the seawater in this area would be terrifyingly poisonous. If the Haitsong hit the ship and it flooded, there would be no way to repair it. They could only watch as the water accumulated, or abandon the ship to escape. However, abandoning the ship would also mean boarding the small ship. The small ship would be tossed about in the seawater, and it would definitely be splashed with the poisonous water. It would still be a dead end. Realizing this, the people on the deck immediately panicked. Even Xiesheng's face became solemn. Although the speed of his cultivation could be described as 1,000 miles a day, he was still just an emptiness realm expert. Only when he reached the transcendent realm could he fly, and he couldn't do it for long. If the ship sank, he could only try to kill the Haitsong. With his current strength, he could suppress the rebellion on the Haitsong. However, he only had 1 life. If the poisonous water splashed on the ship, he would die here. Li Yunqin turned to Lu Baishui and asked, "Is this your idea?" Lu Baishui stared at Xiesheng and his bodyguards and sighed. Brother Li is right. 100 soldiers are hard to deal with. Therefore, we have to make them panic first. The sealing appeared at the right time. Now that they are panicking and their attention is on the Haitsong, we can make our move. With this, the commander of the governor's mansion's bodyguards came out of the 2nd floor of the ship with a few bodyguards. He looked down a few times and shouted a few times. What happened? The bodyguards on the deck also shouted back, and more people heard them. When the brigade commander heard this, he was shocked. He looked around and saw Lu Baishui in the corridor on the 2nd floor. With a cold expression, he grabbed the hilt of the saber at his waist and strode over. He stopped 2 or 3 steps away from Lu Baishui and stared at him. "Captain Lu, what happened?" Lu Baishui frowned. "How can I ask the commander? The sailors we recruited were originally a group of desperados. How could I have thought that they would go this far and betray me at this time?" The commander was furious. He frowned and said, "Don't you know the people you recruited?" "You." Lu Baishui sneered and interrupted him. "The people I recruited? Officer, since you work in the governor's office and accompanied that Taoist priest to the sea, you must be the governor's trusted aide. Don't you know if it was you who released these people from prison and arranged for them to board my ship?" The commander was stunned. Lu Baishui snorted again. "You and I are not stupid. Before such a thing happened, I could pretend that I didn't know anything. I would just treat it as a way to avoid disaster, and treat the 1,000,000 taels of silver as a gift to the commander-in-chief. Until now. Humph, whether we can survive or not is up to you. Don't you have people on that ship?" At this time, the relationship between the 400 to 500 people on the 2 ships was very complicated. On Li Yunqin's ship, there were people from the Freemasonry, Mu Nanju, and Xiesheng. According to Lu Baishui, there were also prisoners and spies arranged by the government, and the people arranged by Lu Baishui. It was really a mess. But what Lu Baishui said was obviously the truth. The brigade marshal was speechless for a while after hearing Lu Baishui's words. He blew his beard and glared at him for a while before cursing loudly. "Damn it, your mouth is really good. I'll deal with you later. What should we do now? Turn around now." Lu Baishui stopped laughing. He looked at the commander for a while coldly and snorted. "Now? Humph. The Haitsong is obviously prepared. If we turn around now, we may not be able to avoid it. If you want to live, you'd better wake up your soldiers right now. Even if our ship manages to avoid the collision, the Haitsong will still have to move backwards. Then it will be a boarding battle. If we can get the Haitsong and take it, we can live. Otherwise, let's all die here with our own thoughts." Chapter 604. Although the commander had a bad temper, he was trusted by the governor of the Stormy Waves Road. Obviously, he wasn't a reckless guy. Seeing that he couldn't get any advantage from Liu Baishui, he didn't want to waste his breath on him. He glared at Liu Baishui and turned to the soldiers beside him. Watch him. Unsheath your sword. If he dares to move, kill him on the spot. The 4 soldiers shouted, Yes, sir. They drew their short swords and walked toward Liu Baishui fiercely. But Liu Baishui didn't move, his face expressionless. The commander looked at Li Yunxin behind Liu Baishui. What are you doing? Li Yunxin had been doing well on the ship these days, so he was a well-known figure. 2 of the 4 soldiers had asked him about good or bad luck, so they thought they knew his background. He raised his leg to kick Li Yunxin away. Sir, this kid is a swindler. Get out of here. It's none of your business. The grass on the graves of those who dared to scold him like this was already 3 feet high. But Li Yunxin didn't care about the soldiers' good intentions. Taking advantage of the slope, he turned around and slipped away. The commander stared at him for a while, and then turned to Liu Baishui with a hideous smile. I know Master Liu is famous and you're a kung fu master. But listen carefully. You can fight, but you can't kill. These 4 soldiers of mine have killed more people than you. Master Liu, don't take things too hard, and exchange their 4 lives for yours. After saying that, he raised his hand to hold on to the railing and jumped down, landing beside Xiesheng. At this time, the deck was in a mess. Those who came up to bask in the sun were businessmen who had nothing to do. Now that the situation was not good, they all wanted to run down the cabin. If they really fought, there would be stray arrows on the deck. But someone thought he was smart and said they couldn't go down. If the Haitsong crashed into the ship and the seawater entered the cabin, wouldn't they all die? Thus they swarmed up again. There was a captain on the ship, but he was pulled over by the commander and told to turn the rudder. The captain was also one of Liu Baishui's men, but he couldn't care less at this moment. His life was more important. He hastily ordered the sailors to lower the oars, and the men on deck to lower the sails. But the sailor, and the confusion of the merchants below, stumbled and delayed things for a long time. When the sailors finally got into position, the merchants also ran to the deck. Another wise man said that there would be an arrow on the deck to starboard. They should run to the left of the forecastle. There were about 40 to 50 people in the caravan. Logically speaking, these 40 to 50 people should be easy to deal with, but Liu Baishui was right. Among the remaining so-called sailors, there were a few who were genuine, but there were quite a few who were criminals arranged by the governor of the Stormy Waves path from the prison. But the real fugitives either became officials or nobles, or became heroes of the martial arts world. How capable could they be, who had been thrown into prison and forced to come to sea? Thus chaos ensued. Nearly 100 people swarmed to the port side of the giant ship, and even the body of the ship seemed to shake. Fortunately, the soldiers standing on the side of the ship were not shaken off. The commander of the brigade brought more than 100 people on board. There were about 70 people on the Taowu, and less than 30 on the Haitsong. Now that the less than 30 people had been killed, the remaining soldiers had to maintain order and prepare to fight the enemy, which made it difficult for them to do so. In the end, he gritted his teeth, pulled out his sword, and killed 4 or 5 people before he calmed the frightened rabbits down. Then he arranged the formation and asked Xie Daozhang, who was next to him, what to do. After doing all this, the Haitsong was very close to the Taowu. The Taowu was dodging, and the Haitsong was also turning. Seeing that the Haitsong was about to hit the side of the Taowu, the commander of the brigade shouted for his soldiers to stand firm and get ready to take over. They could already see the people on the opposite ship. There were about 100 of them, and they were holding bright weapons in their hands. They seemed to be quite organized, and their positions were also good, a sharp contrast to the panicked people on the Taowu. The commander of the brigade was stunned. He snatched the monocular from the soldier's hand and took a closer look. The weapons in the hands of the dozens of people in front were long and narrow swords of the army. Indeed, the 30 soldiers had been killed. But the problem was, where did the weapons in the hands of the remaining 70 or 80 people come from? It was not a random preparation. Nor did it look like a private stash. They had hooks, huge axes, shields, and everything else. It was a proper naval battle formation. Damn it! The commander of the brigade was shocked, and he turned to look at the tower behind him. Liu Baishui had disappeared. The 4 soldiers with their swords were also gone. But there was blood flowing down the corridor on the 2nd floor. Even though he couldn't think clearly at the moment. But a chill had crept up his spine instinctively. They seemed to have been tricked. As soon as this thought came to his mind, he found something strange. Previously, when he was shouting on the deck to arrange the formation, the people on the deck were also running around and shouting. Although he killed 4 or 5 people to show his power, and finally made them quiet down, they shouldn't be as quiet as now. On the deck there were only 30 or 40 people left. Most of them were merchants and a few really timid sailors. The rest of the people were all gone. He immediately shouted, "Defend the enemy." After saying this, he hurriedly added, "Watch your back." But the Haiqing was so big. He and half of his soldiers were near the bow of the ship, because he was afraid that the enemy ship would hit the bow of the ship. But when he shouted like this, the order couldn't reach every soldier's ears immediately. So the killing began. In fact, it was very easy. The ship was supposed to carry 200 people. Of them, 46 were merchants, and the rest were sailors. The soldiers of the governor's mansion forced their way onto the ship, and there were more than 70 people. Now there were more than 30 people gathered at the bow of the ship, and the remaining 40 or so stayed in the belly and stern to defend against the enemy. First, the ceiling appeared in the sea, which scared them. Then, they found that the Haiqing was going to hit the ship in reverse. Once they were hit into the water, they would die immediately. So the soldiers' attention was focused on the group of people at the bow of the Haiqing. They had seen the ugly behavior of these useless people on the ship. They didn't expect them to defend against the enemy, as long as they didn't make trouble. But now this group of useless people was going to kill them. When the brigade marshal realized that something was wrong, the people hiding behind the ship rushed out with long spears in their hands. They didn't fight with the well-trained soldiers, but just raised their spears and stabbed. In the first round, 7 or 8 soldiers who didn't even have time to turn their heads were pierced through. The rest, who were holding short knives, couldn't react in time, and another 7 or 8 died. When they finally realized that something was wrong and wanted to fight back, the number of people sneaking up on them was 3 times their number. Moreover, they weren't a motley crew, and their cooperation was quite skilled. It was a sneak attack. They had the advantage in numbers, weapons, momentum, and terrain. How could they fight back? In just a few breaths, some were stabbed to death, and some were pushed into the sea. Half of the soldiers on the Haiqing were gone. Screams came one after another, but it was impossible for the brigade marshal and Xie Sheng to rescue them. The bow of the ship, together with the 2 of them, was surrounded. They were surrounded by sailors on the ship. Most of them had been released from the prison on the stormy waves path. But now they looked solemn and calm, even calmer than the soldiers of the governor's office. According to Li Yunxin, the spears in their hands were 4 meters long, and they were carried by 2 people. The spearheads were sharpened and burned with fire. They were very lethal when they stabbed people, and it was a piece of cake for them to deal with soldiers who didn't wear armor. When a ship went out to sea, it always brought wood to repair it. Now those would have become weapons. What was more shocking was the people who used these weapons. From the beginning to the end of the incident, it only took a quarter of an hour. The soldiers of the governor's office, as well as Xie Daozhang, who didn't make a move and only watched coldly, were like turtles in a jar. It was hard to say for Xie Daozhang. As long as these soldiers with long spears charged together, they would be driven into the sea and corroded into a pool of blood. The brigade marshal seemed to be unable to accept this fact. He was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say. Then, he turned his head to look at the Haiqing. The huge ship that was about to crash into them had changed its course. After another quarter of an hour, the 2 ships brushed past each other and went in the same direction again. The people at the bow of the Haiqing burst into cheers. The crowd parted and pushed more than 30 soldiers of the governor's office to the side of the ship. The brigade marshal suddenly realized what they were going to do and was about to say something. Plop, plop. Like dumplings, the soldiers who were tied up were pushed off the ship and fell into the poisonous water. The people cheered again, even drowning out the screams of the soldiers. At this time, the crowd on the Haiqing also parted. Lu Baishui walked out. He stood 5 or 6 steps away from the captives expressionlessly, hands behind his back, and stared at Xiesheng for a while. But Xiesheng was also expressionless. He looked at the brigade marshal and asked, "Lord Su, how does it feel to be a captive?" So the brigade marshal's surname was Su. The brigade marshal Su widened his eyes and gritted his teeth. "What a wicked person! How dare you? You dare to kill an official at sea. Are you planning to become a fugitive and join the pirates?" He said this with righteous indignation. But when the crowd heard it, they all burst into laughter, as if the brigade marshal had told a joke. Lu Baishui also smiled. When the brigade marshal and the soldiers looked at each other with laughter, he waved his hand. Everyone immediately fell silent. It could be said that orders were strictly enforced. "Join the pirates," Lu Baishui said with a smile. "Join who?" "Join Lu Fei." The brigade marshal glared at him. "You killed the soldiers of the governor's office." "Humph. I'm afraid he won't accept you." "Oh, ha. So it's true." Lu Baishui turned around with his hands behind his back and paced 2 steps. The passage that the crowd made for him was only wide enough for one person to walk. Now he was pacing. Wherever he took a step, the people on that side would silently move aside. But the people behind him would immediately fill in the gaps, not giving the soldiers any chance to escape. Just 2 steps and Brigade Marshal Su was shocked. Such tacit understanding and obedience were rare even among the elite soldiers of the East Sea nation. What on earth was this? It said that the governor of the Stormy Waves Road secretly colluded with Sea King Lu Fei. Lu Fei helped him kill some small pirates, and then gave him 30% of the wealth from robbing merchant ships. The governor didn't really send the navy to kill them, so they lived in peace and benefited from each other. So it's true now? The brigade marshal stared at him. Nonsense. Lu Baishui smiled again. It's already this time. Brigade Marshal Su, why don't you think about when and how these people were thrown into prison by you? Those who didn't know what he was talking about might be confused. But for Brigade Marshal Su, it was like a thunder exploding in his head. Just because of this sentence, he felt that he suddenly understood the cause and effect of the matter. The order he received was very simple. He led the soldiers to go to the sea with Taoist Xia to find the Spirit Mountain. On the way, he did one more thing. The governor wanted Lu Baishui's family business, but he couldn't do it on land, so he could do it on the sea. When they reached the East Sea chain, the local officials who also received the order would cooperate with the governor's soldiers on the ship to arrest Lu Baishui. If he didn't agree and wanted to cause trouble, it didn't matter. Among the 400 people on the ship, there were more than 200 who were pardoned from the governor's prison. They had already secretly formed an army and set up their subordinates. They promised that if they helped the army to do something, they would be given official positions. This way, Lu Baishui bought the ship. The money would naturally go to the governor. He also asked him to gather enough people to go to sea. That would be suicidal. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? But at this time, Brigade Marshal Su realized that the problem was with those prisoners. Lu Baishui asked him when they were caught, and why they were caught. They were caught after annihilating the original pirates on the 2 giant ships. Everyone knew that there was an internal conflict in Sea King Lu Fei's lair. The 2 pirate leaders brought these 2 huge ships to surrender, but they were all killed by the governor, and the ships were captured. Brigade Marshal Su knew the inside story of this matter. The 2 pirate leaders who came to surrender, the governor recognized them. On the night they docked, he was the one who led the team to get them. They were tied up and sent to the governor's mansion. But once they entered the backyard, they were released and were politely invited in. They talked with the governor for half an hour, and no one knew what they said to annoy the governor. So he rushed in with his men to kill them. It took a lot of effort to kill them, and one of them kept saying things like greedy. About 3 months after the execution of the pirates, another group of refugees came from the west. It was said that the villages near the old Demon Mountain suffered a natural disaster and couldn't survive. so they became thieves. But they didn't kill or harm people, and only robbed everywhere. Like a swarm of locusts, they ate and ran. It happened near the provincial capital, so it was easy to catch them and put them in prison. The pirate leaders came with their ships in spring. The refugees were put in prison in summer. Now it was only a few months later. Until now. Brigade Marshal Su saw the group of refugees behind Lu Baishui and suddenly realized, what refugees? What natural disaster? They obviously pretended to be refugees to fight their way into the provincial capital. But why did they fight their way into the provincial capital? Thinking of this, he was shocked. You, Lu Baishui stood still. He looked at him coldly. This spring. 2 ships, 297 brothers' lives. Do you think no one will find you to settle this account? The brigade marshal was stunned. He suddenly clenched his sword and said, You are Lu Fei? Chapter 605. Lu Baishui sneered. You are not that stupid. The commander yelled again. No. Impossible. Lu Fei has been on the sea for more than 50 years. How can you be Lu Fei? Lu Baishui still sneered. Do you think Lu Fei is alone? The commander was stunned for a while. How many Lu Feis are there? Sea King Lu Fei is a title. It has been passed down to me for 1,000 years. Lu Baishui smiled. You dare to come to the sea without even knowing this. You are courting death. Hearing Lu Baishui's words, even if the commander didn't know how many people Lu Fei was, he knew that the sailors on the ship were actually pirates. Moreover, they were well-trained pirates who were even stronger than the imperial army at sea. At this time, Li Yunxin was still watching. He had been watching since the Haitsong turned. He had been watching the people on the ship for the past few days, and found some clues. For example, those people were discussing and plotting. There were also many people who said different things. They must have had unusual experiences in the past. However, he was not a god who could see the world clearly. From what he had observed, he only knew that these people were not good people. Many of them were discussing how to seize the ship. He didn't expect that they would seize the ship in this way. They didn't seize the ship from Lu Baishui, but from the soldiers. This messed up his plan. He had wanted to observe Xiesheng secretly. Then, he would send him to Dragon Island and get more information from him. But now, he and the soldiers were surrounded. This was troublesome. It wasn't Xiesheng who was in trouble. It was Lu Baishui. Since the Haitsong wouldn't crash into them, the environment on the Haitsong wasn't dangerous, considering the venom in the sea. Then, Xiesheng was an emptiness realm expert. To him, emptiness realm experts were like ants. To emptiness realm experts, mortals were also weak. Xiesheng's current body was tyrannical, far surpassing the so-called Vajra body, realm of secular martial arts. When he mobilized his spiritual power, those wooden spears that fiercely stabbed his body would at most cause superficial wounds. The only weak points were probably the eyes and the lower body. However, he wouldn't easily expose these 2 points to others. If Xiesheng wanted to escape or even counterattack, he could force his way into the crowd and start a massacre. The soldiers followed. Lu Baishui and the other mortals couldn't resist them. If he had extra spiritual power to write talismans and throw 1 or 2 into the crowd, it would have been more efficient. On the other hand, Lu Baishui was not stupid. Otherwise, Li Yunxin wouldn't have been able to see some clues until the day the 2 giant ships were about to set sail. He knew that Xiesheng was a cultivator. So what preparations did he have? Li Yunxin hid behind the crowd and watched calmly. This crowd was none other than the traveling merchants. These traveling merchants really didn't know anything, including Pan He. While looking at Lu Baishui and the governor's mansion soldiers, he was also paying attention to these people. With the steward of the Freemasons on this ship, there was no reason why the people from Southernwood House couldn't come up. There must be people from Mu Nanju on the Taowu. Who is it? But while he was calm, others were not as calm as he was. The traveling merchants just wanted to take the ship to the East Sea chain. Knowing that there were soldiers on the ship, they weren't worried. Instead, they were happy and felt that this trip would be safe. They panicked when they saw the sealine, but they knew that they would be fine as long as they didn't get splashed by the seawater. But now they realized that they had boarded a pirate ship. And this pirate was so bold that he even killed the soldiers of the governor's mansion. An hour ago, they were basking in the sun and fishing happily, but now they were on the battlefield. The timid ones were so scared that they wet their pants. Those who were a little braver also turned pale. These people recognized Li Yunxin. The one who was close to him whispered, "Little immortal, you told me that there would be a bloody disaster this year. But we would be able to turn bad luck into good luck. Are you referring to this trip?" Li Yunxin glanced at him. It was the guy who liked to show off. He smiled. "I was just joking. How would I know?" The guy's face turned bitter. "You." As soon as he said this word, he heard the brigade commander shout, "Taoist Xia, it's time for you to take action." This sound scared the rest of his words back into his mouth. Pan He, who had been staring at Li Yunxin, turned to look at Xiesheng. Xiesheng was very calm from beginning to end. He looked at the situation on the ship coldly and didn't rush to take action. Even after Lu Baishui and Travel Commander Su had shown their cards, she only had a cold smile on her face, carefully watching Lu Baishui's every move. Li Yunxin knew that he was watching Lu Baishui's attitude. Even if Lu Baishui showed the slightest fear of Taoist Xia, Xiesheng probably wouldn't directly conflict with him, because it meant that Lu Baishui knew Xiesheng's strength. Xiesheng had taken the dead bodies off the ship, but this was not enough to make Lu Baishui afraid. Xiesheng would think that Lu Baishui knew his background, and if he knew his background and did this, it meant that he was prepared. There were other methods to deal with him. Xiesheng and Li Yunxin were smart people, but their personalities were polar opposites. Li Yunxin was never afraid of taking risks. He was like a madman who wanted to die. Every time he took a risk, it was a reward for him. It also made him crazier. If he had complete emotions in his previous life, maybe he would be a big gambler. This time he took Lu Baishui's ship to the Dragon Island was a good example. He never thought that he could deceive everyone and find out the situation on the Dragon Island without leaving any traces. If he really did it, it would be the best. But if something happened or someone found out, it was no big deal. He just had to act according to the situation. But Xiesheng was the opposite of Li Yunxin. He was extremely cautious and conservative. Not only that, he wouldn't hide in the mountains for more than 10 years. If it was Li Yunxin, he would have already run out. So at this time, he didn't act blindly without thinking. But Lu Baishui didn't let him see through him. He sneered, "Take action? A Taoist who knows how to play tricks. Do you fools really think he is an immortal? Push them into the sea." After saying this, he immediately turned around. It was as if the fate of Taoist Xia and the army was already decided, and he didn't need to pay attention to them anymore. So Li Yunxin knew that this guy really had other tricks up his sleeves. He sighed. He had thought that he had met a true hero, but he didn't expect that Lu Baishui was not completely honest. No matter what difficulties he had, he still hid his identity from him. Although Li Yunxin was the same, when Lu Baishui turned around and glanced at him, Li Yunxin still smiled at him. His eyes didn't move, but the corner of his mouth twitched. This kind of smile was called a fake smile. Chapter 606. Lu Baishui turned his face away. It seemed that he didn't want Li Yunxin's identity to be exposed, which meant that although he had changed from a land hero to a sea hero, at least he still remembered Li Yunxin. Although, he should also be suspecting whether Li Yunxin's identity was real or fake. He turned around and gave the order. The pirates around him were astonishingly fast. The second mate on the Taowu immediately shouted in a low voice, "Raise your spears forward." The pirates let out a low growl as they ferociously thrust their long spears forward. At this moment, Xiesheng finally made his move. He was expressionless at first, but he was still expressionless now. Suddenly, he made a sword gesture with his right hand and slashed in the air. Thus, in front of him and the pirates, 10 small golden swords immediately appeared. Each sword was about the length of an adult man's forearm. They vibrated slightly and made a buzzing sound. Even the air around them was distorted. It was like a hot summer day, and the air above the road was distorted because of the heat. But these 10 swords didn't bring heat, but coldness. The pirates who were advancing were stunned. And even the second officer, who gave the order, was stunned. For these mortals who only heard about cultivators and immortals in legends, the sudden appearance of the golden swords in the air might be more shocking than blood and corpses. I am a cultivator. I don't want to kill more people, Xiesheng said coldly. Step back. He was standing on the side of the ship. He made a sword gesture with one hand and put the other hand behind his back. He stood in the wind, his clothes fluttering, full of the aura and demeanor of a master. After saying a few more unfathomable words in an awe-inspiring tone, the spears that were originally pointed at him trembled and slowly retracted. The second mate also took a step back, looked at Lu Baishui and whispered, Lord Lu, what should we do? Lu Baishui turned around again and frowned at Xiesheng. Daoist Xie, this is between me and the governor's mansion. This is a grudge between me and the governor's mansion. You are a virtuous person, so why must you get involved? After saying this, he paused and his throat moved. When he said the first few words, his tone was calm and composed, as if he was not the least bit afraid of the 10 light swords in the sky. However, this slight pause betrayed his emotions. Xiesheng noticed this and snorted softly. These people want to go out to sea with me to look for Dragon Island. If you kill them, who will serve me? He flicked his fingers lightly. One of the lightsabers flew out and pointed at Lu Baishui's forehead. I won't get involved in the affairs of you mortals. The people from the Haitsong retreated to this ship. Leave the Haitsong to us. I won't make things difficult for you. Commander Su called out. Daozhang, this won't do. Who among us knows how to steer a boat? You may as well kill them all. Save a few of the stewards. If you do not wish to commit murder, cast a spell on them all. Us brothers are not tired. We cut off their heads one by one. Lu Baishui ignored the brigade commander's nonsense. He looked at Xiesheng. You're making things difficult for me. I want to bring both ships back to Aquarius Bay. We can't lose a single one. Commander Su was about to call out again. Lu Baishui waved his hand and smiled. But I also know that you have other things to do. How about we discuss a compromise? Daozhang, please allow us to kill these soldiers to comfort the souls of our brothers who died in vain. Then you will follow me to Aquarius Bay. I will find another ship suitable for going out to sea with sailors. We will respectfully send you to the sea to look for dragons. How about this? Commander Su laughed loudly. Vulsh *T. Daozhang is an expert. Why would he and you lowly? His voice stopped abruptly. Xiesheng flicked his finger. The lightsaber that was originally pointed at Lu Baishui's forehead turned around and pierced through Commander Su's head without any resistance. That lightsaber did not stop. It drew a beautiful arc and returned to the sword formation. Commander Su was still smiling. His face was still full of mockery and disdain. He maintained this posture and fell into the sea with a splash. Then, a series of gurgling red blood bubbles appeared. The crowd was in an uproar. Those soldiers were originally a little relieved. But with this sudden turn of events, these people couldn't wrap their heads around it. They didn't know why. Xie Daozhang killed the brigade marshal? But Lu Baishui reacted much faster than them. He immediately shouted, kill. Xiesheng killed Commander Su and turned his wrist again. The 10 lightsabers immediately returned to his side and stood upright to protect him. When the pirates heard the order, they were stunned for a moment and then shouted. Dozens of spears rushed forward at the same time. More than a dozen people were stabbed to death and pushed down. They retracted their spears and attacked again. None of the officers and soldiers on the deck were left. Lu Baishui sneered. Daozhang Xie is really sensible. There was a faint smile on Xiesheng's face, but it was also cold. He said, there is no such thing as sensible. In my eyes, there is no difference. Lu Baishui shook his head. Of course there is difference. I promised to send you to the sea. When we arrive at Aquarius Bay, I will naturally send you away. Li Yunxin and the merchants around him witnessed all this. Their mood could be described as ups and downs. Of course, they were talking about those ordinary people. First, they saw the appearance of the pirates, and then they saw that the Imperial Army had the upper hand. Then, the commander of the Imperial Army was killed by Daozhang Xie. Finally, Daozhang Xie conspired with the pirates. These people saw all this and felt like they were in a dream. They did not expect so many twists and turns. They could not understand why Xiesheng betrayed them without warning. Li Yunqin just smiled and said to himself, "How can I be the protagonist if I am so cowardly?" But he guessed from the beginning that Xiesheng would kill Commander Su, based on his speculation about Xiesheng's personality. Now it seemed that his speculation was extremely accurate. In other words, he had almost figured out Xiesheng's temper. He was timid. This timid came from his sense of superiority. Li Yunqin also had this sense of superiority. The place I came from was much better than here. What kind of people have I not seen? With this sense of superiority, he would be proud of his identity. But because of their different temperaments, the same sense of superiority turned into two extremes. Li Yunqin was very bold. Since he had a sense of superiority, why should he be afraid of the country bumpkins of this world? It was a disgrace to his identity to live an ignoble life like the ordinary people here. Xiesheng was very timid. "My life is so precious. It's not worth it for me to die in your hands." And the sentence "in my eyes there is no difference." Lu Baishui felt that he was saying that his group of pirates and imperial army were not good people. Maybe they would not keep their promises. Only Li Yunqin knew what he meant. He was saying that they were all just ants. There was no need to talk about morality with ants. Of course, he would use them and kill them when he should. How could people care about the contempt of ants? Xiesheng was now an emptiness realm cultivator. In the past, just a month ago, an emptiness realm cultivator with the same talent as him had the ability to kill all the people on the ship. The spiritual power in the world was endless. An emptiness realm cultivator could do many things with the spiritual power in the world. That Commander Su told Xiesheng to freeze the people on the ship, so that they could be beheaded one by one. Freeze was not easy to say, but it was still possible to use a talisman to kill dozens of people in an instant. However, the qi in the world was chaotic. Xiesheng could only use the spiritual power in his body, supplemented by the spiritual energy that he had absorbed with great difficulty from heaven and earth. But he was such a cautious person. How could he use the power in his body to protect his soldiers and kill more pirates? He just wanted to go out to sea. It did not matter who he cooperated with. After boarding the Taowu, the imperial army had no value to him. In fact, it was the same for Lu Baishui. He wanted to take revenge on the governor of the Stormy Waves Road. Xiesheng was not part of his revenge plan. If he could avoid more casualties, he should be happy to see it. Therefore, Xiesheng turned his wrist. The 10 light swords that were protecting him immediately turned into 10 small spots of light that revolved around him. He took 2 steps forward. The pirates made way for him until he reached Lu Baishui's side. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd, pausing on Pan He's face. He said to Lu Baishui, "I have a question. If I wanted to kill you just now, who would you ask for help?" Lu Baishui looked at the sea and smiled. "This is the first time Taoist priest went out to sea. It's not strange that you don't know. It is said that there is a fairy mountain above the East Sea. On the fairy mountain are Shinryu and the Dragon King. Since Taoist priest is looking for the Dragon Island, how could you not know? The Dragon King of the sea doesn't like cultivators. If Taoist priest Xiesheng used spells to kill people on the ship, it might attract the demon immortals. So Taoist priest Xiesheng is smart." Xiesheng's face changed. He took a step forward and got closer to Lu Baishui. "Have you seen Shinryu and the Dragon King?" Lu Baishui's body leaned back slightly, but he didn't step back. "I haven't seen Shinryu and the Dragon King. But I know that someone went out to sea to look for Shinryu." He didn't say anything else. Li Yunqin let out a soft ha in the middle of the group of traveling merchants. He smiled. Someone went out to sea to look for Shinryu. In the ears of others, this sentence was just a casual remark. Anyone who lived in the East Sea Kingdom, or even the neighboring countries along the coast, should have such a thought. Every year, there were indeed many desperate people who drank and went out to sea. They thought that once they found the dragon god, they could realize their dreams and come back from the dead. But if it was heard by someone else, Lu Baishui once told Li Yunqin that Sheng Guanyu went out to sea to look for Shinryu, and Li Yunqin told him that Xiesheng was the villain who destroyed his family and chased him all the way here. At this moment, Lu Baishui said this to Xiesheng. If what Li Yunqin told him was true, such a normal sentence would definitely attract Xie Sheng's attention and vigilance. He wanted to make use of Xie Sheng's reaction to see if what Li Yunqin had said to him was the truth. Li Yunqin smiled again. Then the smile slowly froze on his face, and he stared at Lu Baishui. Since he used such a reason, how could he not predict what would happen? Now that Lu Baishui wanted to see Xie Sheng's expression, he would definitely see what he wanted to see. Xie Sheng thought that Shinryu was the person he was looking for. So no matter who went to look for Shinryu, he would be moved. But Lu Baishui actually used what Lu Baishui told him before to test him. Li Yunqin stared at Lu Baishui for about 3 breaths, and then took a deep breath. Then he slowly exhaled. He saw that Xie Sheng was indeed moved, because of what Lu Baishui said. Someone is looking for Shinryu. He slowly frowned. Who? Lu Baishui was silent for a while, and then he smiled. Many. Just in Baishui town alone, there are 6 or 7 people who want to go out to sea to look for Shinryu. Who among us hasn't thought about it? Xie Sheng's eyes became cold. Are you making fun of me? Lu Baishui shook his head. Master Xie, don't worry and take the boat. When we arrive at Aquarius Bay, we will arrange for someone to send you to Dragon Island. After saying this, he turned around and was about to leave. But he didn't expect that Xie Sheng, who was calm and didn't want to cause trouble, suddenly changed into a different person. He flicked his finger, and the 10 light pearls around him immediately expanded and became 10 golden light swords again. 9 swords forced the pirates around them away, and the last one was hanging upside down above Lu Baishui's head. Make it clear, Xie Sheng said word by word. Who is looking for Shinryu? Do you know how to go to Dragon Island? It was originally calm and peaceful, but because of one sentence, even Lu Baishui didn't expect it. He didn't know that finding his own organization was Xie Sheng's first priority. And that night, Li Yunqin planted a seed in Xie Sheng's heart, making him even more wary of this world and the people in this world. Now that Lu Baishui asked this question, Xie Sheng, who was a smart person, how could he think of Lu Baishui as a simple pirate? He must think that Lu Baishui knew something about Shinryu. Otherwise, why would Lu Baishui say that someone went out to sea to look for Shinryu? Even Lu Baishui didn't expect this sudden change. At this moment, Xie Sheng's face was a little ferocious. The aura of a cultivator was completely released. It was like an angry beast facing Lu Baishui, making people feel the most intense pressure at the first moment. The pirates around them also felt the intense danger. They didn't doubt that if Master Lu didn't answer to Xie Sheng's satisfaction, he would probably die on the spot. Even if he was satisfied, it would probably be a disaster. This Taoist priest Xie was alone when he stood on the deck and killed Brigade Commander Su without warning. But now he became another person. Is this what a cultivator looks like? Lu Baishui's face also became cold. Xie Sheng wants to fight? Did you forget what I said just now? The monster in the sea. Where did you hear that from? Or did you know it from the beginning? You. But Xie Sheng didn't care about what he said now. It was like before, he was a lazy beast that didn't care about the ants crawling on his body. But now that he found out that the ants had something he wanted, why would he care about the threats? The sea was so vast. Even if there was a monster, how could it coincidentally come to this place? Who are you? After he said this, the light sword above Lu Baishui's head fell with a buzzing sound. The tip of the sword pressed against his head and cut his hair. Soon blood flowed down along his temples. Chapter 607. The pirates let out a cry of surprise. Lu Baishui must have a high prestige in these people's hearts. They had seen Xie Sheng's ferocious appearance and the mysterious means he used. But when he saw that Master Lu was injured, he shouted and thrust his spear forward. The 9 light swords protecting Xie Sheng's body immediately reacted. They made a soft sound and formed a light curtain in the blink of an eye, sweeping toward the crowd. Not only the spear was easily broken, but the wrists of the people holding the spear were also cut off. The lightsabers were extremely sharp. They didn't feel pain until the spear and the hand fell to the ground. Suddenly, there were screams, and the smell of blood spread. Lu Baishui frowned and shouted, "Go back! No one move! Go back!" The pirates cared about him, and he cared about his subordinates. After such a shout, everyone knew that they were no match for him, so they could only glare at Xiesheng. Although they didn't retreat, they didn't fight anymore. "I don't want to kill more people. And I don't want to cause trouble," Xiesheng said coldly, "so you should know. If you don't answer my questions you will die. Now." Lu Baishui stared at him for a while and suddenly laughed. "Okay. I will tell you, someone told me about you." Li Yunxin smiled in the crowd. But Lu Baishui was silent after saying this. Xiesheng waited for a while and frowned. "And?" "Nothing." Xiesheng looked at him deeply. "You want to tell me that you only know this much?" "Of course I know a lot." Lu Baishui smiled. "But I won't tell you." "Ha!" Xiesheng snorted. Then his fingers moved slightly. The lightsaber that cut Lu Baishui's hair slowly moved downwards, through his forehead, nose, lips, chin, neck, and finally stopped at his chest. The lightsaber moved silently, but slowly a line of blood appeared. Lu Baishui's whole face was cut in half by a thin line of blood. The lightsaber cut his skin. Then more and more blood gathered and flowed down his face. It seemed to be some kind of demonic and evil makeup. "I have a way to cut you open alive without killing you. I can let you see how your heart beats and how your intestines move," Xiesheng said. "You only have one life. Don't be stupid." Lu Baishui touched the blood on his lips and looked at it. Then he looked at Xiesheng calmly. "I was entrusted by someone, so I'll do my best. If you want to say that I'm being foolish, I've been foolish for decades. I've seen the sharpest knives and the strongest liquors. What's death to me?" Xiesheng sneered. "Of course death is nothing. But before you die." As he said this, Lu Baishui suddenly lifted his hand and tore off his coat. Thus his upper body was exposed. Xiesheng was stunned. The merchants on the deck were also stunned. His chest was no different from an ordinary person's. But on his back, abdomen, and ribs, there were densely packed red runes. However, upon closer inspection, one would realize that they were not tattoos. Instead, it was a scar that had healed after the burn. There seemed to be a strange light in Lu Baishui's eyes. He slightly raised his head and looked at Xiesheng disdainfully. "The holy fire shines brightly, the holy light shines brightly. What joy is there in life? What suffering is there in death? Do you know how I got these runes on my body? After I joined the sect, the first thing I received was the holy fire commandment. I used a red-hot knife to slowly burn the damning scripture on my body. How is this pain compared to your methods?" The pain brought by burning was indeed the most severe pain that a human could feel. Xiesheng knew this clearly. He stared at Lu Baishui suspiciously and coldly for a while, then said, "You're so righteous now. Why did you ask me about this before?" Lu Baishui sneered. "Even if I'm loyal to someone, I have to find out whether it's true or not. I just don't want to be stupid. Now that I know it's true, if you still want to ask, just kill me." Xiesheng stared at him for a while, and his expression became cold. He moved his finger. At this moment, Li Yunxin's finger also moved. Ordinary people only felt that a moment had passed, but it was enough for cultivators and demons to do many things. Xiesheng made a hand gesture, activated the spirit energy in the ocean of qi and mountain of snow, and sent an order to the light sword that was formed by his own spirit energy outside his body. As soon as the order was given, the light sword immediately cut Lu Baishui's chest in half. And at this moment, Li Yunxin also sent out a fierce demon power. This demon power was about to break Xiesheng's protective light sword and make his dharma lose its effect. But after this moment, both of them changed their minds. The giant ship suddenly shook. But at this moment the sky was still blue. The sea between the Taowu and the Haizong suddenly became turbulent. It was as if a terrible force was stirring the water under the sea, or like a volcano that couldn't suppress its anger. With a loud bang, a water column suddenly surged up from the sea. This water column was even higher than the ship's railing, but not a single drop of water splashed outwards. The seawater was tightly gathered in one place and became solid. On top of this transparent water column, the water splashed open, revealing a general wearing a white helmet and armor. This general seemed to be a junior general. He had red lips and white teeth, was neatly dressed, and held a three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand. His expression was dark, and his eyes were wide open, staring straight at Xie Sheng, who was on the deck. After staring for a breath's worth of time, his body slightly leaned forward. The wave that was supporting him then moved towards the Taowu, all the way to the side of the ship. The two huge ships were still moving swiftly with their sails flapping. The wave under his feet followed the two ships steadily and did not fall at all. He reached the side of the ship, but didn't jump off the wave. He only looked down at Xie Sheng and shouted, "I'm General Fubo under the command of the Eastern Sea Dragon King. Who dares to use Dharma on the Eastern Sea?" Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. The pirates were fine. Swords and soldiers always gave people an inexplicable sense of confidence. So they all clenched their weapons. Although they were surprised and panicked, they didn't go too far. But the merchants were different. They were all businessmen, and very few of them were hot-blooded. But now they saw a so-called General Fubo with their own eyes. First, 3 people fainted without saying a word. The rest all knelt on the ground, as if they were blown by the wind, shouting, "Dragon King, help us," and so on. Li Yunxin was also among the crowd. He sighed, and sat down cross-legged, watching the show. He turned into a young boy, not very tall. A group of men in front of him were kowtowing, which covered him. But even if he didn't cover himself, the demon who called himself General Fubo didn't notice him. Because at this time, Lu Baishui smiled and pointed at Xie Sheng. "General. He was the one who used Dharma just now. He even threatened me with the lives of hundreds of people on these 2 ships. General, please investigate." When Xie Sheng used Dharma to threaten him, he didn't panic at all. Now that something strange had happened on the sea, and a demon who called himself General Fubo appeared, he didn't panic. Looking at this demon was like looking at a general in the secular world. Li Yunxin frowned slightly and stared at Lu Baishui. He had misjudged. He didn't see that this person had so many stories. But it wasn't that he had become stupid, and it wasn't that Lu Baishui was the smartest person in the world. But he didn't want to see things the way he used to. At least after he said goodbye to Lu Gongzan in the forest of Dingzhou. When looking at a person, he began to try not to use his own subjective will to define this person's identity. He began to try to see and think like a stranger. When he first saw a person, that person was a blank piece of paper. He slowly interacted with this person, and then based on what he saw and heard, he added something to this blank piece of paper. He was trying to feel the feeling of being an ordinary person. But now it seemed that it wasn't going well. Lu Baishui wasn't the kind of person he thought. At least he wasn't as simple as he thought. In fact, he should have seen it a long time ago. Now that he carefully recalled the various details of his interaction with Lu Baishui, he realized that there were indeed many suspicious points. The problem was that everyone would look suspicious. Even a person with a broad mind would have some expressions on their face that would make people suspicious. If you looked at them with colored glasses, this meant that to ensure one's safety and sobriety, one must limit one's world to a very small area. One must not have too many interactions with others, and not exchange too much information with others. Without interaction and exposing one's world, one didn't need to worry about what others would do to him. One didn't need to spend time to carefully analyze and observe everyone. If he really did that, he would die of exhaustion. In fact, even in the secular world, many people followed this principle of survival. As the saying goes, you may know a person's face, but not his heart. People who often gave their feelings in sincerity were more likely to be hurt. If they were tired and afraid, because of this kind of hurt, they would protect themselves. They only had 2 or 3 close friends. When they met strangers, they would only talk to them, or just ignore them. In the eyes of others, this kind of person was indifferent and not easy to get along with. But it was indeed the best way to protect oneself. If one didn't give his feelings, it would be difficult for others to hurt him. Indifference was also a kind of barrier. But it was also cowardice in another sense. Li Yunxin used to have this kind of cowardice, but now he was trying to get rid of it. He sighed. He went to see Xie Sheng and that General Fubo. The appearance of this demon seemed to mean that the East Sea Dragon King did exist. What Lu Baishui said to him while chatting was all true. It also meant Lu Baishui. He seemed to have a closer relationship with the East Sea Dragon King. On this ship, there should be a shopkeeper of the East Sea Kingdom named Mu Nanju. Demon. Mu Nanju. Interesting. Hearing Lu Baishui's words, General Fubo turned his eyes to him. He stared at him up and down for a while, then waved the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand. Instantly, a layer of mist formed between him and Xiesheng, separating the two of them. No one doubted that this layer of mist could block. Xiesheng didn't seem to doubt it either. So, following his usual temperament, he frowned slightly and put the 10 light swords back to his side to protect himself. He used to live in the demon's cave, so he had seen the demon's abilities. So, even though he didn't fight with people often, he could tell that this demon general's cultivation wasn't weaker than his. And they were on the sea, so he had to be careful. So he said in a low voice, "Since you are a general under the East Sea Dragon King, you should also be a general under the Shinryu. I am not an enemy of the Shinryu, but an ally." But the demon general didn't even look at him. He first protected Lu Baishui, then praised. "What a beautiful person! You should be a good person. Who are you?" Li Yunxin laughed in his heart. This demon general was quite interesting. He first looked at Lu Baishui's appearance and said, "You should be a good person," then asked who he was. Lu Baishui paused for a moment, then laughed and cupped his fists. "You have good eyesight. I am Lu Fei. I have some relationship with the East Sea Dragon King. Since you are the great General Fubo under the Dragon King of the East Sea, you must be highly valued, so you should have heard of me." The demon general let out a sound of surprise. He carefully looked at him, then finally smiled. "You are Lu Fei?" "Yes. I have indeed heard of you in front of the Dragon King. You are very beautiful. You really are a good person." At first, his face was as calm as water, his lips were tightly shut, and he looked very imposing and dignified. But now, when he grinned, his face was revealed. His grin was so wide that it reached his ears. His mouth was filled with sharp teeth. Not the top row, or the bottom row, but the entire mouth was filled with densely packed fangs. Some of the braver ones saw that he was talking to Lu Baishui in a friendly manner, so they raised their eyes to sneak a peek at him. Now that they saw his appearance, they were scared out of their wits, and quickly buried their heads again. This demon general seemed to know that his mouth was scary. He just smiled, then quickly closed his mouth again. Then he turned around and frowned at Xiesheng. "Who are you? How do you threaten a good person?" Xiesheng took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled. He repeated what he had said before. "Since you are a general under the Dragon King of the East Sea, you should also be a general under the Shinryu. I am an ally of the Shinryu." The demon general immediately shouted, "Hey! Who do you think you are? You don't deserve to mention the lord of the Shinryu." He raised his eyebrows and looked Xiesheng up and down again, seeming to be angrier. "You are so ugly. You are definitely not a good person. My mistress hates ugly people the most. It doesn't matter if you are ugly, but you dare to use Taoist techniques on the sea. But do you know that my mistress hates people like Dao Tong and Kenzo the most?" Li Yunxin laughed again. He felt his mood lighten. This demon general was really cute. If there was any conflict in the future, because of what he said today, he would be spared. Xiesheng's face was extremely ugly after being scolded by this demon general. This place was not like land. If he encountered such a situation on land, the smartest thing to do would be to run away. But now, he was surrounded by water. Even if he escaped, where would he find a boat? And how would he get back to land? An emptiness realm cultivator, in the vast sea, was just a drop in the ocean. To him, the current situation was like a stranger to him. But something strange happened. Before this great General Fubo appeared, the water between the two huge ships surged violently. But just as the demon general finished his rebuttal, the surface of the sea suddenly began to shake again. Before anyone could figure out what was going on, a huge beast covered in jet-black scales suddenly jumped out of the sea. It swallowed this great General Fubo in one gulp, and then fell back into the sea. This demon general was still awe-inspiring just a breath ago, but now that he was swallowed whole, He didn't even make a sound. Everyone saw it clearly. The head of the huge beast that jumped out of the sea was as big as a huge ship, and its body was even more terrifying. When its head fell back into the sea, its body was only halfway out of the water. As for its head, it was a dragon's head. Seawater splashed on the deck, drenching a large number of people. However, the poison that was supposed to kill upon contact had actually lost its toxicity at this moment. Not only were the mortals stunned, even Lu Baishui and Xiesheng were stunned. Not only Lu Baishui and Xiesheng were stunned, but even Li Yunqin was stunned. After a full 3 breaths, he widened his eyes and clenched his teeth. If that guy was in front of him now, he would definitely curse. Ninth young master. What the hell are you doing now? Asterisk. Note 1. The holy fire shines, the holy light shines. What joy is there in life? What bitterness is there in death? These 4 sentences are quotes from the online game, Sword Hero Online version 3. When the disciples of the Ming cult entered the sect. Here is the explanation. Chapter 608. It was supposed to be a good situation. He mingled with these smelly mortals, just to find a chance to sneak into the Dragon Island, or find out the situation around the Dragon Island. He was not some kind of perverted masochist who liked to be surrounded and questioned by a bunch of idiots. Now a General Fubo who recognized Lu Baishui jumped out. If this demon took these 2 ships to the East Sea Dragon King, not only could he find Shang Guanyu's whereabouts, but he could also get information about the Dragon Island. Most importantly, he had been hiding his identity all along, so Lu Baishui didn't know much about him. But now, he swallowed it. He had to find it from the beginning again. But Lu Baishui and Xiesheng were at loggerheads. If this General Fubo died, there would be no turning back. Something that could have been solved perfectly. Now he had to take action and expose himself. Li Yunqin felt that he was about to become an incense burner. Smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He looked at Lu Baishui and Xiesheng. They were also looking at each other. Lu Baishui didn't know what swallowed General Fubo. He clearly saw the dragon's head. Could a giant creature with a dragon's head belong to the Dragon King of the East Sea? Xiesheng was also shocked. He also didn't know the origin of the monster that swallowed General Fubo. It might be the East Sea Dragon King. He had been with demons for more than 10 years, so he knew that some demons looked like humans, and some looked like beasts. It wasn't a big deal to eat or kill a demon general under his command. Because of these uncertain guesses, neither of them moved. They looked calm on the surface, but they were looking at each other gloomily. After staring at each other for 2 seconds, Lu Baishui said in a low voice, "Take the wounded away." He was expressing his attitude, but Xiesheng didn't seem to want this to end. He sneered, "Wait. Do you think the matter between us is over?" Lu Baishui sighed. "I advise you not to cause more trouble. When you arrive at Aquarius Bay safely, I will send you away. If you continue, I'm afraid you will lose your life. Do you still think I made up the East Sea Dragon King?" "It's just a sea beast," Xiesheng said coldly. "Do you think you can scare me?" Lu Baishui was stunned. A wise man, seeing what had just happened, would have believed him. Xiesheng looked like a smart person, but he was so stubborn at this moment. It was really puzzling. He didn't understand, but Li Yunqin did. Because he saw the dragon's head, Xiesheng believed that this sea beast was related to dragons. Since it was related to dragons, it should be here to help him. And the facts proved that it had swallowed great General Fubo. Lu Baishui believed that the appearance of the sea beast proved that he was familiar with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Xiesheng also believed that the appearance of the sea beasts proved that he was indeed someone under Shinryu's protection. His organization was summoning him. With the 2 of them together, it would be a wonder if they would give up. Li Yunqin sighed, ready to stand up from the ground. At this moment, the sea rippled for the 3rd time. This time, it was far in front of the Taowu. A monstrous wave rose up, almost turning into a mountain. Not only did the wave under Great General Fubo's feet become inconspicuous splashes, even the 2 huge ships seemed to become small boats. The monstrous wave covered the sky and the earth. Even the seaweed and fish in the sea were swept up. against the blue sky and the bright sun. It was as if there was a ferocious ghost dancing in the wave, extremely frightening. In just 2 breaths of time, before anyone could react, this towering wall of water stood on the bow of the 2 ships, moving forward with the ships, but not crashing down. The reason for this was because there was a godly monarch standing on top of the wave. This godly monarch was more than 3 meters tall. He was not wearing armor, but he was still better than wearing armor, because his body was covered in black scales. Even his cheeks were covered, revealing only a pair of golden eyes. Above his golden eyes on his forehead was a pair of dark golden horns. These horns were thin but extremely long, reaching straight into the sky. It made this godly monarch seem extraordinary and disdainful. Now he stood on top of the wave, with a pair of bright eyes. He looked down at everyone on the ship, and let out a thunderous voice. "You still don't restrain yourself when you see me. Are you courting death? If the 2 of you keep arguing, I will bury you at the bottom of the sea. Behave yourselves." After saying this, the wave retreated and fiercely slammed down. Such a huge wave was enough to smash the 2 huge ships into pieces. However, this godly monarch seemed to only want to teach everyone a lesson, and had no intention of killing. Only the head of the wave came crashing up. But in an instant, 2 of the 3 masts on the ship were broken, leaving only the main mast. The wave crashed down on the deck. The 2 huge ships shook violently as if they were about to capsize, and it took a full quarter of an hour for them to barely stabilize. But those sailors who were injured and unlucky were blown to God knows where. Presumably, they had no chance of survival. The group of merchants around Li Yunxin was lucky. They were originally hiding in front of the ship. When they were blasted to the ship by the current, there was always something pulling them, which saved their lives. The black-armored godly monarch on the wave came, and went very fast, and he didn't even announce his name. However, the horrifying power he showed shocked Xiesheng. Since leaving the valley, it was the first time he had met such a powerful demon. It was so powerful that it was beyond his expectation. Could such a power exist in this world? After the huge waves washed the huge ships, the mortals were busy checking the wounded and rescuing people. Even Lu Baishui had no time to be distracted. As for the cultivator, Xiesheng looked serious. He circulated his spiritual essence and carefully checked the surroundings. Things seemed different from what he had imagined. The big demon on the wave sounded unfriendly. Didn't he come to help me? Where did he come from? Before the 2 demons showed up, he didn't notice them at all. The big demon just now gave him a terrible sense of oppression. He once again realized how dangerous this world was. Therefore, he didn't notice that little immortal Li had disappeared. In fact, Li Yunxin was still on the ship. But he was in the sealed cabin at the bottom of the ship, which he had separated for the 9th young master. The cabin was originally dark, but now the talisman lit up the place. Through the wooden planks at the bottom of the ship, he could hear a dull and distant whining sound. It seemed that it wasn't seawater, but strong wind outside the cabin. Occasionally, he could hear the squeaking sound of the wood of the ship being squeezed. It seemed that this huge ship sailing on the sea was about to disintegrate at any time. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and looked at the demon standing in front of him. "9th young master, you tell me, why did you do this?" Now the 9th young master showed his appearance as a demon god. He was very tall, and the pair of golden horns on his head almost pierced the cabin roof. He walked back and forth in the cabin proudly, as if he was very satisfied with his majestic appearance. Then he said, "Why did I do this? Did I do anything wrong?" Li Yunxin sighed helplessly. "After all, I owed you in my previous life. It took me a lot of effort to catch a demon general. Why did you eat him?" The 9th young master smiled, but it was hard to see it in the demon god's body. "Didn't you and Chicken Spirit say along the way that we should observe secretly, disguise ourselves, and figure out the movements of the demons on the ship? Now that such a thing has jumped out, who on the ship dares to do anything? Where do you think you can find out? In my opinion, it's a bad thing that this little demon showed up." He shook his head proudly. "I just happened to swallow him. Hey, how dare you talk about the Dragon King of the East Sea? After swallowing this little demon, the ship will be safe again. Since you don't have to show up, You can take your time to observe. Li Yunxin was stunned. He didn't expect the ninth young master to think so much. He talked to Pheasant all the way, and only regarded him as a person who did things. He just felt that the ninth young master was not interested in it, so it was better to let him play and not make trouble. At that time, he could deceive him. If he met Lu Baishui or Xiesheng, he would also be at a disadvantage if he was not careful. Unexpectedly, the demon heard it and paid attention to it. Now he did this thing. It could be said that he wanted to help, although it was not a good help. In this case, it was not good to blame him. Li Yunxin sighed again. It turns out that you don't have to worry about it. Well, it's a good intention. He shook his head again. But next time, ninth young master, you can try to keep him alive. Or don't. If you do, use him well. It's good to take him down and interrogate him. It's also good to get some inside information. The ninth young master stood in front of Li Yunxin with his hands clasped behind his back. He snorted and laughed. Do you think I'm a fool and can't think of it? Just watch. After saying this, he bent down and opened his mouth wide. With a wah sound, he spat out a person. His fiend god body was more than 10 feet tall. According to Li Yunxin's measurements, he was almost 4 meters tall. It was a colossus through and through. At this time, although he bent down, he was still on top of Li Yunxin's head. If he spat out again, if it weren't for Wei River Dragon King's quick reflexes that allowed him to dodge to the side, the messy things in his stomach mixed with seawater would have splashed all over his face. The one he spat out was the white-armored Great General Fu Bo previously. This demon was awe-inspiring, but now he was in a sorry state. The armor on his body was corroded and full of holes. Even his face was full of bloody holes. He looked like a rotten corpse. Beside him, there were some digested and undigested broken limbs and unknown bones. The demon general fell to the ground and felt dizzy. After a long time he slowly got up. He looked up and saw Li Yunxin, then the ninth young master. He immediately pointed at him, trembling. You, what kind of demon are you? You. The ninth young master didn't care about what he said. He spat a few more times on the demon's body, and finished spitting out everything in his mouth. His body swayed and turned into a human, wearing a white robe. I said I'm not a fool. I tasted this thing yesterday. Bah, the meat was cold. It was disgusting. If it wasn't to help you, I wouldn't even bother to swallow it. Ask me slowly. I'm leaving. Humph. Li Yunxin hurriedly said. Bah! The ninth young master ignored him. As if he was angry, he turned around and went out of the cabin. Chapter 609. Li Yunxin was stunned. He stared at the bottom of the cabin for a while, and then smiled. The world was unpredictable. He met Lu Baishui in Whitewater Town. He thought that Lu Baishui was a man who was as open as a piece of white paper, and intended to make friends with him like an ordinary mortal. But he didn't expect that Lu Baishui was hiding something from him. Although Lu Baishui was a real man who stuck to his Tao, and would rather die than betray Li Yunxin, but this kind of feeling was not so pure. Li Yunxin knew that he was not without fault. He was the one who hid his identity first. As he once said to Xian Shilio, it was difficult to get a good result if you start with deception. He didn't expect that the ninth young master whom he was secretly on guard against, and whom he asked Shanji to make a good impression on all the way, was really thinking about him and doing things for him. After all, there was a deep hatred between them. Who could say for sure what would happen in life, and how people's hearts changed? So he felt a little warm in his heart. As the saying goes, lose in the east corner, gain in the mulberry. Perhaps he might try it again cautiously. As he thought of this, he heard General Fubo on the ground suddenly let out a low roar and pounced on him. This demon was swallowed, so it was extremely afraid of the ninth young master. Now that the ninth young master had escaped through the wall, only Li Yunxin was left. Li Yunxin was a super big demon in the mysterious realm. When his aura was restrained, even a mysterious realm cultivator would find it difficult to see through him, let alone a little demon general. This demon also lost some of its mind because of the pain and torture. It didn't think that a mortal could be so fearless. so it wanted to take him down and escape. This pounce was fierce, but in the eyes of Wei River Dragon King, it was no different from an ant waving its tentacles to show off. The fiendish demon that had leaped into the air was sent flying back with a boom, smashing into the wall of the cabin. Li Yunxin felt a little better at this time. This casual strike contained several kinds of magical powers. Not only did it send him flying back, but it also strengthened the wall with its demonic power. It was as if the demon had hit an iron wall. With a bang, it was flattened into a thin pancake on the wall. Dead. Then he hooked his index finger slightly. A misty green iron chain stretched out and locked the muddle-headed soul of the demon. At this moment, he frowned slightly and waved his hand at the ground. A blue flame immediately ignited, burning all the dirty things on the ground. At the same time, he took out a talisman from his bosom and shook it, releasing a cloud of black mist. With one hand, he pointed at the demon general's soul a few times from afar. A strange talisman formation formed around him. This array formation was to temporarily ensure that the demon soul was clear-headed and not stupid. After finishing all this, he squinted at the black fog and said, "Goddess Penglai, I'm going to interrogate this demon soul by torture. I've specially invited you to watch. Let's see what I can do if you don't tell me the truth." Goddess Penglai had been trapped in the talisman for more than 10 days, and it didn't feel good at all. She was only released now, and her head was probably spinning, and she didn't know where she was. But since the demon had some consciousness preserved by Li Yunxin, it immediately shrank back as soon as it saw Goddess Penglai. It was as if it was more afraid of her than it was of the 9th young master. Goddess Penglai turned around and saw the great General Fubo. She immediately screamed, "You! Ayaya! Hey! You! Kill you! Kill him!" These two seemed to know each other. The demon's soul became even more afraid when it heard the demoness screams. He curled up on the ground and trembled as he kowtowed. "Please spare me, Your Highness! Please spare me! I was possessed for a moment. Please spare me, Your Highness! Please spare me!" He kept kowtowing as he stared at the demoness and Li Yunxin. It seemed that he was not only afraid of Goddess Penglai, but also afraid of Li Yunxin's soul hunter strength, which could kill him with a wave of his hand. Or perhaps he thought that the demoness had found a helper. This scene made Li Yunxin frown slightly. He didn't expect this. Previously he met Mrs. Sanhua in the temple of Mrs. Sanhua. That demon seemed to be just a little demon. Although she had secrets, her words were incoherent, and she didn't seem like an important character. Now that he thought about it, she was at most a detail or a clue. He met Goddess Penglai again in Whitewater Town. She seemed to have something to do with Mrs. Sanhua. It was almost the same style. She claimed to be an immortal from Mount Penglai, but Li Yunxin didn't take it seriously. He thought that she must have made up an identity for other purposes. Now that she was released, he wanted her to see how he would interrogate this great General Fubo, and let her think about whether she could make up her story. He didn't expect that the scene today, what she said seemed to be true. So he was a little stunned, pointed at the great General Fubo, and shouted in a low voice, "Speak! Who is she?" Without thinking, the demon general kept kowtowing and immediately said, "She is the Lord of Penglai, the righteous god of Mount Penglai in the East Sea. She has been guarding the spirit mountain for thousands of years. Goddess Penglai, I was bewitched. She was really a Goddess Penglai." Li Yunxin frowned again. "Go on. What evil things have you done?" The demon general hurriedly said, "I shouldn't have been bewitched by the traitor. I had no choice. Goddess couldn't protect us at that time, and the traitor claimed to be the Dragon King of the East Sea." Next, he rambled on about his difficulties and begged for forgiveness. It was all cliché, but just based on these 2 sentences, if he was telling the truth, it all corroborated with what the demoness had said these days. She used to be the righteous god in Mount Penglai. Later, for some reason, her monster power gradually declined, and she was betrayed by the Dragon King of the East Sea. The demon general said that Goddess Penglai had been in charge of Mount Penglai for thousands of years. Lu Baishui said that the name of the Dragon King of the East Sea had been passed down among the people for thousands of years. This meant that goddess Penglai was born 2,000 years ago, which also confirmed what the demoness had said to Li Yunxin before. Li Yunxin also asked her if she remembered what her real body was, and who sealed her in Mount Penglai. But she couldn't remember anything. This was also similar to Mrs. Sanhua. The Mrs. Sanhua temple in the wild forest seemed to have been destroyed for a long time. But now when he recalled its original appearance, he realized that the temple used to cover a large area. The ruins were surrounded by towering trees. Only the area around the temple was covered in grass. There were no trees. It showed that the foundation was very good when it was built. At least it was not by mortal means. Otherwise, it couldn't have been preserved for so long. He had always been suspicious about the origin of the three flowers. Therefore, he had checked the local records, trying to find information about the Mrs. Sanhua temple. But he found nothing. It was not surprising that he found it. It would be strange if he couldn't find it. Nowadays, people attach great importance to things like sacrificing gods and monsters. The Dragon King Temple of Lugongzan, in the city of Wei, even had the important responsibility of recording important things like sacrificing to the Rain Valley. If the Mrs. Sanhua temple was full of incense at that time, how could there be no information left? It could only be erased deliberately. In the Mrs. Sanhua temple, the three flowers were sculpted in the statue by the method of painting Taoism. The method of painting Taoism appeared about 2,000 years ago. This goddess Penglai was also born 2,000 years ago and declined 1,000 years ago. 2,000 years and 1,000 years were extremely sensitive time points. Li Yunxin felt that he was getting closer and closer to some truth. Maybe some of the things he had mastered now were not thought of by the people behind the scenes. He shouted again, interrupting the demon general's long-winded words. Now I ask you again, have you ever seen a woman named Shangguanyu? Goddess Penglai interrupted and screamed, Hey! Of course. Didn't I tell you? On the way, she told Li Yunxin that when Shangguanyu and her party sailed near Mount Penglai, there was a sudden storm. The storm was so strong that it seemed that it would not stop until the ship was overturned. Fortunately, Shangguanyu was not an ordinary person. She managed to save the ship with her supernatural power. But in the end, they still crashed into the goddess Penglai temple in Mount Penglai. Hearing this, Li Yunxin felt that this female demon was talking nonsense. How could such a big ship crash into a temple? But he didn't point it out. She also said that she stayed in her palace for a long time and asked many questions. Later, she learned about the rebel and went to find the rebel, the Dragon King of the East Sea mentioned by Lu Baishui. After that, Goddess Penglai possessed Li Si and escaped from Mount Penglai. Her explanation for this was, Shangguanyu had gone to look for that traitor, so she had no choice but to expose her hiding place. Finally, she found a way to leave Mount Penglai. Of course, she had to run far away. Li Yunxin ignored her. He only said to the demon general, I'm asking you. The demon general didn't dare to hesitate. He looked even more spineless and said in a trembling voice, Yes, yes, yes. I don't know if her name is you. Last year, there was indeed a woman who made trouble for the king. Speaking of this, he stole a glance at Li Yunxin. Seeing Li Yunxin's dark face, he asked, Is that woman dead? The demon general froze as if he was thinking about something. He said cautiously, Goddess, is this a human being? What? How does he look like a human being? Idiot. Goddess Penglai was furious. Do you think I'll be caught? Bah, bah, bah. The demon general did not fawn over anyone, and his heart was about to break from fear. He kowtowed again. Yes, yes, yes. Reporting to this monster king. That woman was looking for Maida, that traitor, to bring bad luck to her, so they fought. In the end, she was defeated and imprisoned by that traitor. She is still imprisoned to this day. Li Yunxin fell silent with a gloomy face. The demon general didn't know if he had said something wrong. He looked at Goddess Penglai, but she ignored him. After a moment of silence, he walked to the demon soul, stretched out a finger, and touched his forehead. The demon general didn't know what Li Yunxin was going to do, and Goddess Penglai didn't seem to know either. I'm here to see if you're telling the truth, Li Yunxin said in a gloomy tone. You should blame yourself for playing these tricks in front of me at this moment. Then he crooked his finger. The demon general's soul seemed to be suddenly scattered and turned into many clouds of hazy mist, which looked like goddess Penglai now. Li Yunxin raised his hand and grabbed, taking all the mist into his palm. In his left hand, the book of life and death given to him by Bai Yanjun appeared. Then he slapped the mist in his palm onto it. Inside the open book, densely packed words immediately appeared. The demon general had just asked Li Yunxin if he was a human or a demon, and observed his expression. Obviously, he wanted to figure out his identity before thinking about what to say. He was afraid that if he said something wrong and angered this big demon king, he would lose his soul as well. In the end, he was too smart for his own good. Li Yunxin wanted to hear the truth, not happy words. Since he could see that this demon wanted to say what he wanted, he might as well break the demon's soul and search his memory carefully. The last part was for the banshee to hear. He turned around. And slowly flipped through the booklet page by page. From time to time, he raised his head and looked at goddess Penglai meaningfully and gloomily. After flipping through 5 or 6 pages, goddess Penglai suddenly shrunk into a small cloud of black mist and screamed in a shrill voice. "Ah, I didn't lie. Ah, why are you looking at me? Ah, you scared me. Don't look at me." Li Yunxin sneered. Goddess Penglai didn't lie, but she didn't tell the whole truth. From the demon general's memory, the so-called Mount Penglai was indeed related to the Dragon Island. Or, it was the gateway to the Dragon Island. People said that there were 4 immortal mountains on the sea: Dragon Island, Penglai, Ingzhou, and Fanghu. These 4 mountains did exist, but their whereabouts were not fixed. Many people claimed that they saw immortal mountains and immortals, but even the descriptions of the immortal mountains in the same sea area were different. Some people said that they remembered the exact location of the immortal mountains, but later generations couldn't find them, because the 4 mountains were floating on the sea. In the demon general's memory, this goddess Penglai was one of the demon kings that Lord Shinryu personally conferred on Mount Penglai 2,000 years ago to guard the gateway to the Dragon Island. But this memory came from a rumor. General Fubo's true body was a great white shark. He was only at the peak of the transcendent realm about 1,200 years ago. Goddess Penglai was conferred, happened before he was born. About 1,000 years ago, Goddess Penglai's demonic power suddenly weakened. She fell from the profound realm to the emptiness realm. No one knew the reason, but after all, she was conferred by Lord Shinryu. For a while no one dared to rebel. Later, a demon general under Goddess Penglai's command volunteered to go to the Dragon Island to see if something had happened to the true dragon and caused the current situation. Of course, the female demon didn't allow it. Thus, the demon general sneaked away. 3 years had passed since he left. After 3 years, everyone thought that the demon general was dead, but he came back. His cultivation had improved, and he had reached the profound realm. He said that he had found out the reason for his trip to the Dragon Island. It was because of Goddess Penglai's disrespect to the true dragon that the Divine Lord was so furious that he seized her cultivation base. Now, she separated her dragon power and sealed it in him. She conferred him the title of Dragon King of the East Sea, and gave him control over Mount Penglai and the East Sea. She also conferred the other 8 Dragon Kings to manage Ingzhou, Fanghu, and the vast waters around Midland. Therefore, it became a rebellion according to Goddess Penglai. Chapter 610. After the East Sea Dragon King took over the throne, he became more magnanimous. He didn't purge anyone, but he said that he would let bygones be bygones. This great General Fubo was originally a little fiendish demon that didn't make the cut. Because he stood on the right side at the beginning, he got the title of Following the Dragon, and was asked to patrol the East Sea every day. As for Shang Guanyu, he didn't see it with his own eyes, but he heard it from the demon on Mount Penglai. But it was about 80 to 90% accurate. There shouldn't be any lies in this demon general's memory. If there was something he didn't know, it was just something he didn't know. For example, Shinryu made this goddess Penglai the demon immortal guarding the mountain. In that case, what exactly was she? Nowadays, Li Yunxin was experienced and knowledgeable. He had seen birds and beasts that had attained the Tao. He had also seen ghost cultivators. It wasn't like there weren't any stools or carrying pole spirits. And he himself was a dragon child. But he had never seen Mrs. Sanhua and goddess Penglai. When he was with Sanhua, he thought it was because she was seriously injured and lost her mind. So she was confused. But after seeing Sanhua on Mount Yunshan and goddess Penglai here, he knew this kind of thing. Although they looked stupid, he understood it. Looking at the memory of this Supreme General Fubo, they were originally like this. They didn't have any trauma, they always looked crazy. What is it? Li Yunxin realized this was a key point. He suspected Mrs. Sanhua before, but he wasn't sure. Now there was goddess Penglai in front of him. If he could get the inside story from her, maybe the curtain that had been covering him was lifted halfway. Without a doubt, Mrs. Sanhua was sent to him. The mastermind behind the scenes was most likely Mu Nanju, to protect him, and to find out if he was the real crown prince Xiesheng. Then this goddess Penglai. What is her background? Which side is she on? Thinking of this, he slowly closed the book. He looked up at the female demon. The cabin was illuminated by talismans. However, it was not a bright light. Instead, it was a faint yellow flame that hung in the air. Now that he had a terrifying thought in his mind, his eyes were filled with undisguised malice. Thus, when his face was illuminated by the yellow flames, it became even more uncertain, as though he was an evil spirit. So you used to be a profound realm demon. I apologize for my rudeness. Li Yunxin looked at her maliciously, as he slowly paced back and forth. This demon general's head is filled with a lot of things. But there are some things. The more he knew, the more curious he became. For example, what exactly are you? And why did the Shinryu confer you the title in the first place? If I ask you, will you answer me honestly? At this point, he had slowly walked to the front of goddess Penglai. He had been looking through the memory of the demon general and the female monster at the same time, which scared her so much that she curled up into a ball and hid in the corner of the cabin. Now that Li Yunxin was walking in front of her, the demoness seemed to know that something was wrong. After all, she used to be a profound realm expert. After witnessing Li Yunxin's means, she immediately realized that this guy was incredible. He was at least a profound realm expert. With her current situation, what could she do when such a super demon had a bad thought? Therefore, she screamed and rose to the corner of the cabin roof. Aya, I don't know. I don't know either. But where could she hide? With a gloomy smile on his face, Li Yunxin suddenly stretched his neck like a noodle. He put his face in front of the female monster and stared at her. You said you don't know. And I don't know whether what you said is true or not. I have to break you up and see for myself. The female monster looked really scared. She immediately turned into a cloud of mist and ran around the cabin crazily screaming. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know either. Aya, I don't know how to tell you either. You might as well just kill me. No. Aya, don't kill me, don't kill me. I won't know even if you kill me. Li Yunxin looked at her running around crazily for a while, then suddenly retracted his neck and shouted, How many people like you are around the East Sea? The female monster shouted, I don't know. Aya, I only know that I'm alone. At this point, as if she had grasped a life-saving straw, her body suddenly stopped. I know how to get to the Dragon Island. From Mount Penglai, Aya, I know how to get there. The Dragon King of the East Sea also knows. Li Yunxin sneered and said, When I catch him, I will interrogate him slowly. Ba. The female monster spun in the air. That's because the Shinryu opened the sea ban. The Shinryu wants to let people in, so he can get in. I know how to sneak in, Aya, sneak in. Do you want to sneak in? No one knows. Li Yunxin suddenly stopped laughing, as if the female monster's words had triggered something in his mind. He thought for a while, then said, Why didn't you say so earlier? The female monster looked like she was about to cry. A faint black fog was emitted from her body. Aya, I just remembered. Sealing me on the Dragon Island is to suppress something. Aya, I sneak in from there. Li Yunqin was silent for 2 breaths. Then he smiled and squinted at her. Actually, you weren't the only one in the East Sea. You guarded Mount Penglai. There were 2 others similar to you. One guarded Mount Ingzhou, and the other guarded Mount Fanghu. Because the 3 mountains never appeared at the same time. This General Fubo didn't know, right? You didn't say anything about this. The female monster's body suddenly stopped. As if she was extremely surprised, she screamed, "How did you know?" Li Yunqin tilted his head and stared at her for a while, then said, "I guessed. But it seems that I guessed right. You guys are indeed this kind of things. So that's what happened." He said this half to himself, then smiled sinisterly. "Okay. I won't kill you. I'm just kidding. How could I really kill you? Even if I want to die, it's not the right time yet." The black fog that the female monster turned into trembled again. As if she didn't understand that Li Yunqin was still questioning her. But now she seemed to have understood something. So she didn't want to scatter her soul. As if he knew more than her now. As if she had some kind of speculation before. But now, because of 1 or 2 points in her words, she was suddenly enlightened. That was all she could think of. Li Yunqin suddenly waved his big sleeve, and the talisman collected Goddess Penglai again. It was already noon when the merchants ran to the deck. Many things happened later, and it was already afternoon. When Li Yunqin finished dealing with the demon general and the female monster, and got out of the cabin, it was already dark. The wounded were sent for treatment, but it was still unknown whether they could survive. Xiesheng went back to his cabin alone and closed the door. At this time, he should be safe. The immortal lord who appeared on the waves told them not to cause any more trouble. Xiesheng should think that the immortal lord was thinking about him. This meant that the ship had reached the protection of the dragons. He could find the organization soon. Lu Baishui stayed on the deck to comfort the anxious people. He walked from the bow to the stern, directing the sailors to repair the masts and the ship buildings damaged by the waves. At this time, the 2 huge ships on the sea were brightly lit. People could be seen everywhere, like a small construction site. But when Li Yunqin appeared behind Lu Baishui, it was already late at night. The sea breeze blew. The repair work came to an end. There was no one on the deck, except for those on night duty. And Lu Baishui was eating in a sheltered place next to the ship building. He was eating a piece of bread with some pickled vegetables. It meant that he was sharing weal and woe with others. But there was no one around him. He leaned against the shadow and couldn't see anyone. Li Yunqin stood behind him for a while. Lu Baishui slowly swallowed the food and put down the hand holding the bread. Even so, he stood for a while and turned around. He said calmly, "Where did you go, Brother Li?" At this time, there was still a bloodstain on his face. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound was swollen, making him look a little strange. To deal with some private matters. Li Yunqin glanced at the bread in his hand, and then at his wound. "So you are Lu Fei. You know that the Dragon King of the East Sea does exist, and even had some contact with him." Lu Baishui nodded and said, "I hid it from Brother Li, but I have my difficulties. I want to hear it." Lu Baishui sighed and shook his head. He looked around and found a place to sit down. "I saw that you didn't have any other thoughts. I just felt that we were on the same wavelength. Then you asked me, 'Is she your Ling Xi?'" Li Yunqin was silent for a while and said stiffly, "Yes. I didn't have any suspicions about your Ling Xi until later. I heard about what happened in the governor's mansion." Lu Baishui smiled bitterly. "I heard that there was a young cultivator in the governor's mansion. I thought it was Brother Li, so I hid it from you. I didn't expect it to be you." Li Yunqin nodded slowly. "What about you and the Dragon King of the East Sea?" "I'm just a person." Lu Baishui touched the wound on his nose gently. "It's just that the Dragon King of the East Sea is. Alas, there are many people like me who work for the Dragon King of the East Sea. It's an exaggeration to say that we work for him. We just collect some rare treasures on the road and offer them to him. He guarantees good weather for people like us who make a living on the sea." "Brother Li, but who are you?" "The one on the wave." Li Yunqin nodded. "I know, but it's better that you don't know about me." He was silent for a while and thought for a while. "Since you are loyal, I will guarantee your safety. Since you are loyal, is it true that you are hiding in Aquarius Bay? Lu Baishui realized that Li Yunxin's tone had changed. He was not the gentle Li Yunxin from before. Instead, he became cold and a little chilly, like a knife. Maybe this was the real him. He shook his head gently again. Aquarius Bay is just a stop. In fact, it's in. Li Yunxin raised her hand and interrupted him. Brother Lu. Brother Lu, I'm not here to find out where you are. I just want to tell you to leave the East Sea as soon as possible. Something big may happen here in a few days. If you leave too late, I'm afraid someone will die. Lu Baishui was stunned and wanted to frown. But as soon as he frowned, he hissed. The wound caused by Xie Sheng's lightsaber was still there. It was okay to be expressionless, but if he spoke too much, it would hurt. Brotherly, can you tell me in detail? He had to keep a straight face. Leave the East Sea. How far away? Leave the East Sea, that is, go back to land. Li Yunxin looked at him. There may be a war in the East Sea. War? Who? With whom? Li Yunxin stared at Lu Baishui for a while and smiled. The dragon that jumped out of the sea during the day is my cousin. If you want to talk about a war, it's with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Lu Baishui suddenly opened his eyes wide and took a step back. Brotherly you. The person I'm looking for is with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Of course, I'm going to find trouble with him. Li Yunxin said in a low voice. Brother Lu, take care of yourself. After saying this, he turned around and disappeared in the air. Lu Baishui still stood there, stunned and speechless. Although he had many ideas, he still couldn't accept the fact that Li Yunxin, who looked like a human being, was a demon. And if he didn't lie, he was a big demon who thought he could compete with the Dragon King of the East Sea. However, such an identity could not be matched with the Li Yunxin that he had seen, no matter how he looked at it. He stood in the shadow in a daze, listening to the sea breeze blowing in his ears. After standing like this for a long time, he heard something else, footsteps. The brothers on duty were also walking, but these were obviously not the footsteps of his people. The person walking should be good at martial arts, and could barely be regarded as a second-rate master. Now he was walking cautiously in front and behind him. There must be something unspeakable about someone walking like this. It was ridiculous. Just a moment ago, he was thinking about the East Sea, the Dragon King of the East Sea, and Brotherly, who might be a big demon. But now, the footsteps of ordinary people, which were insignificant to those existences, startled him again. Lu Baishui felt that his brain was a bit numb. Too many things had happened on this ship that were beyond common sense. Now all of them came back to him. He felt that his feeling before he went out to sea was correct. There was a big whirlpool, and he was falling deeper and deeper into this whirlpool. He sighed inwardly and told himself to move forward cautiously to look at the man. The ship was very long, and so was the ship's building. Although it was divided into 3 floors, each floor was not a whole space, but was divided into small rooms like a house on land. He was now near the bow of the ship, looking at the belly of the ship, and saw a woman. It was very dark on the deck. He couldn't see her face clearly, but there was only one woman on this ship, Pan He. Her footsteps were light, and her movements were agile. She raised her hand to touch the railing, and silently jumped to the 2nd floor. Lu Baishui sighed in his heart for the umpteenth time. It seemed that something was going to happen again. Now, after seeing what happened during the day, and hearing what Li Yunxin said, even a man like him felt powerless in his heart. This was not a matter of being depressed and dispirited, but knowing that there were some things that he really couldn't do. For example, if the demons really fought on the sea, what could he do? This trip to the sea was to do his own things, and also to solve some problems. He didn't expect that now. He was the incidental thing in other people's eyes. His brother Li and Xie Sheng seemed to be out of his control. Now this woman had jumped out. He had a hunch that the things that happened to this woman after her death might not be something that he could control. But there were hundreds of his brothers on the ship. If he didn't bite the bullet and go to sea, who would? Lu Baishui shook his head, and his figure also rose in the night, going to the 2nd floor. Chapter 611. Now there was only one person living on the second floor. Xiesheng. At the same time that Lu Baishui noticed Pan He's movement, Li Yunqin also noticed it. He was now standing on the top of the main mast that hadn't been broken. The huge ship became smaller under him, and the open sails swelled in the sea breeze. As far as his eyes could see, he could only see the boundless sea. The sea was sparkling under the moonlight, as if the ship was sailing on the back of a giant dragon. Pan He's every move was in his perception. Even if this woman was a martial arts master compared to mortals, her voice was still too loud in the perception of a mysterious realm monster. Her feet stepped on the wooden planks, her palms touched the wall, and she gently exhaled. All these were heard by Li Yunqin, and he made precise movements. He asked Pheasant to erase Pan He's memory of that night, but he didn't get rid of her, because he wanted to let her doubt ferment in her heart. This woman was not smart in his eyes, but she was not stupid among mortals. A Freemason in charge of the Donghai nation suddenly lost her memory on the ship, and her wrist was broken. She should know that someone had done something to her. Someone did something to her, but didn't kill her, and just didn't let her remember. Maybe this person was not completely hostile. It was possible that they were on the same side in some ways. It was just that she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and provoked him. So he attacked her. So this not completely hostile person, in Pan He's opinion, who could it be? It could only be the Donghai nation's grand manager of Nanmaju. This time, Li Yunqin came to the sea to use these two ships as isolation cabins. If he could get rid of the last tail of Nanmaju and the Freemasonry, he would really disappear from their control. However, he found the Freemasonry, but not the Nanmaju. He was a mysterious realm monster, and he was powerful but not omnipotent. Since he couldn't find them, the Freemasonry, who had been dealing with Nanmaju for hundreds of years, should be able to do it better than him. He spared Pan He's life, and only erased the memory of that night because of this. He asked her to find the grand manager for him. Unexpectedly, her gun was useless. He had been paranoid for a few days, but he still couldn't get anything done. It seemed that either the shopkeeper was not on the ship, or he had hidden himself too well. Li Yunqin sighed. These people from the new Freemasonry were really useless. Only Shanji, the ninth young master, and Lu Baishui knew his real identity. Xiesheng knew that there were people stronger than him in the sea, but he didn't seem to think that they were enemies. The ninth young master had made a smart move by appearing on the waves during the day, so that the people on the ship would be on their guard and not cause any more trouble, but it did not frighten them. Xiesheng was meditating in the cabin, just like he did a few days ago. Li Yunqin closed his eyes and carefully observed. Sometimes, like now, when he was close to Xiesheng and there were not many people around, he could sense the qi activity that Xiesheng exuded when he was cultivating. Just by looking at one spot, one would be able to tell the whole picture. Thus, one could estimate Xiesheng's cultivation progress and speed. The cultivation speed of this true prince could be said to be 1,000 miles a day. He seemed to have a treasure in his hand. The spiritual qi on the treasure was not worth mentioning for Li Yunqin's realm, but it was useful for Xiesheng's cultivation. Tonight, his qi activity was a little unstable. Li Yunqin seemed to have reached a critical juncture in his cultivation, and even showed signs of qigong deviation occasionally. But the golden light method that Xiesheng cultivated was given by him. From a certain point of view, Li Yunqin's cultivation foundation, especially for some basic things, was excellent. He had also glanced at the golden light technique. The contents were too shallow for him, so he was well aware of what might happen when he cultivated it. Because of this, he felt it was a little strange. Xiesheng should not show signs of qigong deviation at this juncture. The other strange thing was Pan He. The smell of this woman tonight was a little special. Li Yunqin didn't look at her. Instead, he was smelling and listening. So tonight she smelled more fragrant than usual. He stood on the top of the mast, frowned, and thought for a while. Suddenly he understood. So he drew a circle in the void in front of him, and the scene he wanted to see appeared in the circle. This method, called round light mirror, was convenient, but it had to be used with caution. If Xiesheng's breath was not chaotic tonight, it was very likely that he would be found out. Then he saw Xie Sheng was wearing only his underclothes, sitting cross-legged in the cabin. His eyes were closed, as if he had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation. At this time, Pan He had walked to the door of Xie Sheng's room. Lu Baishui was watching from the other side of the second floor, trying to figure out what Pan He was going to do. But he was just a mortal, after all, and could only see the vague appearance. Pan He stopped in front of the door and made a strange move. She combed her hair. Normally, she should have been vigilant when she was lurking here at night. But now she combed her hair, as if she was going to see her lover. Then the woman tugged at her collar again. She opened her collar a little, revealing her chest. Pan He was bought by Wu Jiasong. In this era, she was called a beautiful middle-aged woman. But in the era of Li Yunqin, she was actually only a beautiful 24 or 25 years old woman. She had a fair complexion, and as she pulled, her snow-white breasts looked a little soul-stirring under the moonlight. Li Yunqin snorted with interest. He saw Pan He reach out her hand and do something on the door, and it opened. As soon as the door opened, she immediately dashed in and closed the door. Such a sound could not be hidden from Xie Sheng's ears. He immediately opened his eyes on the bed and stared at the woman at the door with bright eyes. The cabin he was in was quite large, and Pan He was more than 10 steps away from him. There were only 3 candles in the cabin, and the light from them was limited. Therefore, even with Xie Sheng's current cultivation, he could only see the appearance of the woman. He seemed to be prepared for this. He gloomily stared at Pan He for 2 breaths and said in a low voice, "Who are you?" Li Yunqin noticed that he began to circulate his qi. Spiritual energy filled his body, ready to attack at any time. But Pan He laughed lightly. It was the kind of laughter that a woman would make intentionally, and it was completely different from normal laughter. Even her voice became sweet. "I'm the incense holder. I'm here to deliver incense to Taoist priest." The last 2 words were enunciated lightly and dragged out. Her tone was tactful and full of provocation. It was as if the atmosphere in the room had suddenly become too sweet. As she spoke, she stared at Xie Sheng and slowly walked towards him. When she took the first step, Xie Sheng didn't say anything and didn't stop her. It was as if he wanted to see what she was going to do. When she took the second step, Pan He pulled open her belt. The soft silk belt slid down and fell on her outstretched thighs. And because the belt was pulled open, her snow-white and round thighs were faintly visible. She wasn't wearing underwear. The unique fragrance of a woman's body spread in the room. Xie Sheng slightly frowned, but still didn't say anything. So Pan He took the third step. The silk belt on her thighs slid down, and so did her outer robe. So a delicate female body, with only a light pink doo-doo, was exposed in the room. It was winter, and although the temperature on the sea was getting warmer, people still wore quite a lot of clothes. In this era, there was no 3-dimensional tailoring, so the graceful figure of a woman was hidden under the loose clothes. Therefore, when she took off her outer robe and revealed her snow-white slender legs, smooth collarbones, and round and towering breasts, she finally understood why Wu Jiasong had bought her in the first place. The body hidden under her clothes was rare and wonderful in this era. So she took another 3 steps. Pan He walked to the candlestick on the table. Xie Sheng finally saw her face clearly. His eyebrows gradually relaxed, and he squinted his eyes, and finally said the second sentence. "What do you want?" Pan He stopped in her tracks and gently covered her chest with her bandaged hand. Her doo-doo was very small and thin. Because of the cold, a slight bulge could be seen. At this time, when she covered it with her hand, it had a different effect. She pressed the doo-doo down a little, and her chest was even more aroused. And her flat snow-white lower abdomen was also exposed, reflecting the enchanting undulations in the candlelight. This kind of provocative posture made her voice even more seductive. "Taoist priest, do you want me after asking clearly, or do you want me, then ask?" Xie Sheng's eyes narrowed even more. He stared at Pan He for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then said, "Take it off." His voice was a little hoarse. Pan He put her hand down. "And your body?" Pan He smiled, and pulled the back of her neck with her left hand. The last piece of clothing on her seductive body fell to the ground, completely exposing her beautiful body in front of Xiesheng. Li Yunqin laughed. Xiesheng's throat moved. After 2 breaths, he suddenly raised his hands, and from his sleeves scattered 6 or 7 golden talismans. They fell on the ground, the ceiling and the wall, protecting the room. Then he shouted in a low voice, "Come here." At this time, his voice was full of desire, even slightly trembling. Pan He twisted her waist and slowly walked over. But Xiesheng had already waved his hand again. This snow-white body was pulled into his arms by an invisible force. The cultivator turned into a fierce beast in an instant, and his clothes were also taken off. 2 fiery bodies immediately tangled together. Pan He first let out a coquettish exclamation, and then she let out an uncontrollable moan. Then there was the sound of continuous panting. The huge ship was still moving in the night wind. Lu Baishui didn't know what happened in the cabin. Xiesheng's talismans isolated the cabin, and mortals couldn't hear any sound. But Li Yunqin was still standing on the top of the mast, watching intently. After about a dozen breaths of time, Pan He was pressed onto the bed, and the first battle quickly ended. However, Xiesheng was full of fighting spirit, and soon he started the second round. This time, it took a little longer, about 10 breaths. Then he started the third round without stopping. Pan He was good in bed, and she was flirtatious and flirtatious. Xiesheng was also a cultivator, and he was full of energy. The first 2 times he held it in for a long time, and after a hasty end, he finally got into the mood. This time, it took nearly an hour. When it came to the 4th round, Pan He finally began to beg for mercy. However, begging for mercy was also like provocation. It made Xiesheng, who had been silent all this while and only knew how to work hard, collide even more fiercely. Li Yunqin narrowed his eyes, and he knew why Xiesheng's previous cultivation went wrong. 2 mortals. One was strong, and the other was weak. Generally speaking, the stronger one had more desire in some aspects than the weaker one, let alone cultivators. Cultivation, the essence, qi and spirit. The true fire of Yuan Yang grew stronger with the health of the essence, qi and spirit. Without good guidance, it would be difficult to suppress. At least before Li Yunqin turned 14, Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu had been guiding him in cultivation. Unknowingly, they had helped him resolve this difficulty and prevented him from burning like Xiesheng. It was a pity that Xiesheng started to cultivate the golden light method that Li Yunqin gave him. However, as mentioned earlier, the path of cultivation was very dangerous. It was not like the secular martial arts he learned in the grotto. Without guidance, he ended up like this. But this was only part of the reason. The other part, this was probably a fact that every transmigrator couldn't avoid. Coming to a world with the mentality of a game, and having martial arts that could override all living beings. If that person was originally interested in certain aspects, and had a strong need for it, he had been cooped up in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. Now on this relatively safe sea, he encountered an advantage that came knocking on his door, and he thought that in this world, he had the absolute ability to ensure his own safety and control the situation. Naturally, he didn't care. He would eat the meat first. Therefore, when the 5th round of fierce attacks began, Pan He's body was really limp, and she really didn't have the strength to speak anymore. She really closed her eyes in pain, and she wanted to struggle to push Xiesheng away, but she couldn't use any strength at all. Li Yunqin sneered coldly. When this woman found him before, he thought that she only had petty tricks. Now it seemed she really only had petty tricks. She should have thought of some of the things that Li Yunqin thought of. Perhaps because of her observation of Xiesheng these days, she followed some clues and found out about his preferences and desires. Therefore, this time, she planned to use a direct and forceful method to obtain a channel for deep communication. Unexpectedly, she overestimated her own worth. Xiesheng was a native of this world, but he was a transmigrator. Just like when Li Yunqin came into this world, he didn't completely treat the people of this world as human. He was afraid that this woman would be in danger tonight. Just when Li Yunqin was thinking whether or not to interrupt Xiesheng's good deed that had lasted for nearly 4 hours, he found another person. That person had run to the deck from the lower cabin, and now, without saying a word, He went straight to the second floor of the ship. His footsteps were a little heavy, and he seemed to be in a bad mood. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and looked. It was Wu Jiasong. He laughed, and temporarily gave up on the idea of making a move. He found that Wu Jiasong had walked to the second floor, to the door of Xie Sheng's cabin. After a slight hesitation, he slowly moved closer, and put his ear on the door to listen. Naturally, he couldn't hear anything. After being stunned for a while, he turned around. But he didn't leave. With his hands in his sleeves, he sat against the wall beside the door. It seemed that he wanted to wait. Chapter 6:12. At this time Lu Baishui was waiting. Unexpectedly, his patience was also very good. Or maybe he couldn't fall asleep anyway. He sat in the corner of the second floor with his eyes half closed. For as long as 4 hours, whenever a member of the crew on night duty was seen, a low whistle, like the sound of the wind, was used to signal them to retreat. Thus, when Xie Sheng's 5th round of fierce attacks ended and Pan He completely fainted, it had been almost 4 hours. In the cabin, Xie Sheng climbed up from the soft body. Half of the bed had collapsed. He was an emptiness realm expert and had a strong body, so he didn't care. However, Pan He's back was pressed against the broken stubble of the bed. Although there was a blanket as a barrier, it was still penetrated by the broken stubble in the waves of violent collisions. As a result, the bedding under her was now a patch of blood red. Presumably, her back was also badly mutilated. Xie Sheng glanced at Pan He's naked and twisted body. He walked to the table in the room, picked up a pot of herbal tea, and drank it in one gulp. After burping, he threw the teapot away, and picked up the satin belt that Pan He hung on the table to wipe his hands. Then he turned around and said, "Tell me, what do you want?" Right now, Pan He was in a delicate situation between being on the verge of death and being on the brink of death. She could feel that her life was slowly slipping away, but she was still conscious enough to hear Xie Sheng's words. Therefore she realized one thing. This person didn't just vent on her. He asked her, "What do you want?" because he wanted her to be on the verge of death. She had no doubt that if her answer didn't satisfy him, she would die in such an undignified way. Although she knew that this would be dangerous, she still had a strange feeling. She vaguely felt that she had failed somewhere before. She always failed. This vague thought gave her a strong feeling of unwillingness. But when was the last time? Her gaze became a little unfocused. However, Xie Sheng's snort pulled her back to reality. "Don't talk. Are you really here to die?" She slowly squeezed out a weak voice. "Taoist. Priest. You must be joking. Of course it's. At this point he suddenly coughed as if he was coughing up blood. But when he raised his head, he choked on the blood. Blood spurted out from his mouth, and his face turned green. He used all his strength to raise his hand, and stared at Xie Sheng with wide eyes. Xie Sheng stared at her coldly for 2 or 3 breaths. His eyes roamed over her body again, as if he was wondering if this body was still suitable for him to use. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian sneered coldly and flipped his hand. Pan He's body flipped over, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He coughed violently a few times before he could speak again. Thank you, Taoist priest." As he said this, he tried his best to smile. Unfortunately, his mouth was full of blood, so his smile was not pleasant. Xie Sheng looked at her and sneered. "You really are a bitch." After saying this, he summoned his inner clothes and slowly put them on. As he tied the belt, he sneered. "But I like it. I'll spare your life. Take your time." With that, he walked to the half-collapsed bed. He stretched his hand to the side of the bed and took out a green pill from his Taoist robe. He turned around, pried open Pan He's mouth and stuffed the pill inside. But this pill was as big as a pigeon's egg. How could Pan He swallow it at this moment? Moreover, her throat was injured earlier, so her face immediately showed a painful expression. Li Yunxin had been watching from the beginning to the end. At this time, he knew what this pill was. All cultivators had to dabble in alchemy. Although he was not very good at it, in front of Xie Sheng, he should be a decent student. He knew that this green pill was called the elemental brew pill. It was used as a catalyst to refine more advanced pills. It was considered a semi-finished product, a prototype. Ordinary cultivators didn't care about it. They didn't even want to eat it. This Xiesheng should have gotten it from the governor's office. But he carried it with him. It was too shabby. He grew up under the attention of Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu for more than 10 years. He didn't think there was anything special about it. But after seeing Xiesheng these days, seeing such a person, who really had no one to watch over him, and start cultivating from nothing, he realized how difficult it was, and how dangerous it was. When he was young, he would occasionally play with it like a marble. But in Xiesheng's hands, it became a treasure. Xiesheng stuffed the treasure into Panhe's mouth, then pulled her messy hair and sat her up. He put a palm on her shoulder and said coldly, "I stuffed a pill in your mouth. You mortals can't bear this kind of immortal medicine. If you really swallow it, you'll either die from bloating or die from spiritual power. You need me to circulate my energy to help you digest it. Only then will you be able to bear it and keep your life. It will also heal your injuries. Now, I ask you one question and you answer one." Xiesheng said coldly, "If you tell half a lie, I'll hang you on the mast like this." Panhe's mouth was stuffed, so she could only make muffled sounds in response. So Xiesheng thought for 3 breaths and asked the first question. "Are you a member of the Freemasonry?" Panhe was startled, and Li Yunxin, who was at the top of the mast, let out a ha with interest. He had been standing and didn't feel tired. But at this time, he seemed to be interested in watching a show. He first waved his hand and summoned a cloud under him. Then he touched the void, found a chair, and sat down. Then he rubbed his palm on the little finger of his left hand. There was a golden pill in his palm. This thing was called Red Heaven Golden Pill. First, he used the essence brewing pill that Xiesheng regarded as a treasure to refine a furnace of red pill. Then, he used the red pill and other natural treasures to refine 9 heaven powder. This 9 heaven powder was nourished in a fine gold furnace for 300 years, and then combined with some other treasures to refine red heaven pill. Once the red heaven pill was done, it would take 16 years and 9 months to refine it into a red heaven golden pill. In order to refine a scarlet firmament gold pill, it would take about 400 years, using hundreds of origin brewing pills as a primer, and supplemented with all kinds of heavenly treasures that were worth hundreds of thousands of origin brewing pills. He had about 15 or 16 of these pills in his hand. They were glistening yellow and golden, about the size of a broad bean. Because of the refining method, there was a kind of wonderful smoke, very much like the pot gas, that ordinary people talked about when cooking. Li Yunxin picked one up and threw it into his mouth. While looking at the scene in the mirror, he chewed noisily. Eating this pill like this was a waste of its medicinal properties. Just like the pills he ate on Cloud Mountain to replenish the demon power in his body. But now, he liked the taste of this pill. When he was a human, the only things he could eat were grains and miscellaneous foods. Now that he was a demon, his steel teeth were indestructible, and he felt that his menu of food had suddenly expanded. Eating. It was nothing more than the taste and texture of the food. No matter how crispy the food was, could it be as crispy as roasted pebbles? Just this one bite was probably equivalent to eating the wealth of a country. If a red heaven golden pill was given to a human emperor, that emperor would probably want to exchange the whole empire for it. When he ate such an astonishingly valuable snack, Xiesheng was smiling in the room. So it's true. This sentence he didn't ask Panhe to answer. She seemed to already know. You are just tools that can move and talk. You don't deserve to play tricks with me. After saying this, his palm released a little spiritual power. Then he asked Panhe to absorb some of the essence brewing pill. The woman's face immediately had a healthy color. His aura had also calmed down from its weak state. She clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, "Daoist Xia." Xiesheng snorted coldly. "I'll ask you a second time. Who is the biggest enemy of your Freemasonry in this world?" When Li Yunxin, who was watching the show from the clouds, heard this sentence, his body slightly leaned forward. He seemed to be nervous. He even put down the second red heaven golden pill that he was about to put into his mouth. He already knew this woman Panhe. This woman was a little smart and ambitious. She met a good opportunity to take the position and felt that she had a chance to advance. So she had the drive to risk her life. First she dared to look for him, then she dared to look for Xiesheng. And she didn't see herself as a human. And as Xiesheng said, she really treated herself as a tool. What happened tonight was proof of that. Even when this woman was on the verge of death and was badly mutilated, she still wanted to smile for Xiesheng to see. She was extremely ruthless. She was extremely ruthless to herself and others. If she wasn't so stupid, she was actually very similar to Li Yunxin himself. Because Pan He was this kind of person, so Li Yunxin could guess what she would say. She originally wanted to tell Xiesheng that Shinryu is the sky demon. Because they, the members of the new Freemasonry who only knew part of the truth, still thought that the so-called Great Calamity was really some invasion of the sky demon. They should also know that the origin of this child from heaven was related to the elders of Cloud Mountain. Since they were related, they should be in the same camp. And Xiesheng asked her, "Who is the enemy of the Freemasonry?" According to Li Yunxin's speculation, he probably wanted to use this question to indirectly confirm his own guess. This Xiesheng was extremely smart, so he knew the strategy of asking questions. To get the answer to a question, it was best not to directly ask the question. Also, don't listen to the enemy's unnecessary details and nonsense, because those details and nonsense might be misleading. Only ask what you want to hear, then integrate the results and compare them. This was the best way to get the truth in a situation where there was too much information. The enemy of the Freemasonry was naturally the organization that he belonged to, the organization that belonged to Art Saint Chun Zhao. And Pan He, this woman who wasn't afraid of death and also wanted to take the position, would not obediently surrender at this time. She would definitely want to try and achieve her goal. So she would say, "It's Shinryu," Li Yunxin said softly, staring straight at Pan He. "It's Shinryu," Pan He said softly without any hesitation. "Ha!" Li Yunxin leaned back in his chair and tossed the second jindan into his mouth. She still wanted to lure Xiesheng, the child from heaven, to cause trouble for the Shinryu and achieve their goal. Hearing her answer, Xiesheng was silent for a while. It was indeed the answer he wanted. The god of Shinryu was the leader of the Little Demon Protection. For him, he believed that the Little Demon Protection, created by the Shinryu, was the organization that he should find. And his organization was the enemy of the Freemasonry. Pan He's answer indeed supported his point of view. And for him, there was indeed a factor that Li Yunxin didn't know that made him believe in this. He asked the second question just to see if Pan He would start telling the truth, since he thought he already knew the answer. In fact, Pan He lied. But Xiesheng believed that what Pan He said was true. This was the part that made Li Yunxin the happiest and most excited. At this time, such an interesting thing was rare. The two people with ulterior motives, because the information they had was limited, they both thought that they knew everything. They said their own lies. But in the end, it became the truth in each other's ears, and made each other even more certain of their own thoughts. Li Yunxin slapped his thigh and laughed. Although his laughter was blocked by the barrier that he cast, and no one could hear it, he still felt that it was extremely amusing and carefree. Halfway through his laughter, he suddenly stopped laughing and snorted coldly. Back then, when Su Yusong and Zhuomuja saw him being played around by all kinds of fake news, they probably laughed like this too. Those two bastards. Fortunately, there was nothing left of them. Li Yunxin snorted again, threw the third jindan into his mouth, and chewed it fiercely. Since Xiesheng got the answer he wanted, after a moment of silence, his expression became slightly relaxed. He circulated qi in his palm again. Pan He let out a moan. The wounds on her back and lower body began to heal slowly, but at the same time, it was extremely itchy, and she couldn't help but moan a few more times. These moans seemed to arouse Xiesheng's interest, but at least he knew that he was doing something serious now. He only reached out his other hand to Pan He's chest and fiercely pinched it a few times. As he played with it, he said, "At least you knew your place and told the truth." Let me ask you again. Is there anyone else like you on this ship? Other people like you. Li Yunxin knew that Xiesheng was referring to people like Mu Nanju and the Freemasonry. He only knew about Mu Nanju after he went to Rong City in the state of Yu. This Xiesheng should not know about it now. It was best not to tell him. So Li Yunxin's fingers moved, and he was finally ready to interrupt their conversation. But then he stopped, because someone else moved. It was Pan He's husband Wu Jiasong, who was sitting outside Xiesheng's vault, waiting in the cold wind for a long time. At this time, he finally couldn't wait any longer. He gritted his teeth and muttered something. He suddenly stood up, turned around, and was about to smash the door. But when his aggressive hand was about to touch the door, he stopped. As if he was hesitating. After hesitating for about 2 or 3 breaths, he fiercely stamped his feet. He lightly knocked a few times. In the room, Xiesheng's words were interrupted by the sound of knocking on the door. He was not in a hurry to ask. Instead, he sneered and put more force into his hand. Ha! Your man has been waiting outside for a few hours. Do you want to call him in? Chapter 6:13. Pan He was about to speak, but Xiesheng wasn't asking for her opinion. She didn't know what he was thinking. He suddenly exerted force in his palm and dissolved half of the elemental brew pill in her mouth. The wounds on Pan He's body healed quickly. It only took 2 or 3 breaths. The scabs on the surface of her body fell off. She returned to her fair, delicate and fragrant appearance a few hours ago. Seeing her like this, Xiesheng laughed repeatedly. He waved his hand to undo the restriction in the cabin and said in a low voice, "Who is it?" Wu Jiasong had been knocking outside the cabin for a while. Now that he finally heard someone's voice, he was stunned. When Xiesheng shouted speak again, he hurriedly said, "Ah, my Taoist priest's room is." Xiesheng looked at Pan He. This woman had recovered her strength. Hearing their conversation, she was about to pick up her clothes on the ground. However, her pair of jade rabbits were in Xiesheng's hands, so she didn't dare to get up and walk away. She only tried to move a little, but Xiesheng pulled her into his arms and pinched her with his fingers. He squinted his eyes evilly and waved his hand again. The cabin door opened silently. "Your wife." He squinted at Wu Jiasong, who was standing at the cabin door with his hand still in the air. "Your wife is not bad. What's the matter?" This ugly and lewd scene unfolded in front of Wu Jiasong. His wife was naked and in Taoist priest Xie's arms. Her hair was messy and her skin was flushed. Even the bed was half collapsed. There was still a certain smell in the room. How could he not know what had happened in the past few hours? Pan He wanted to lower her head and turn around. However, she couldn't move because of Xiesheng's hand. Wu Jiasong could only see her clearly. He raised his head and put on a calm expression. "What are you doing here? Go back." Wu Jiasong stared at the two of them, and his expression froze. He seemed to have turned into a puppet. He could only move after 2 or 3 breaths. At first, he seemed to listen to Pan He and subconsciously took a step back. But then he stopped, widened his eyes and pointed at Xiesheng. His lips trembled. You, Xiesheng tilted his head. "That was right. It was your wife who delivered herself to our doorstep. Why, do you want to play too?" Hearing this, Wu Jiasong still said, You. After saying these 3 words, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Pan He opened her mouth as if she wanted to scream, but she swallowed it back. Xiesheng snorted in disappointment. He raised his hand and pinched Pan He's face, taking out the origin brew pill that had already become smaller. He pushed her away and said with a frown, "Don't be an eyesore here. Get him out of here." Pan He was startled. She hurriedly picked up her clothes from the ground, put them on, tied them up and ran to help Wu Jiasong up. Xiesheng said coldly, "Come back tonight." Li Yunxin watched all of this from the sky. When he saw this, he let out a soft eh. Because when Xiesheng toyed with Pan He and now humiliated Wu Jiasong, he could understand and experience a little. However, he had never experienced Wu Jiasong's emotional state before. It was hard for him to imagine what kind of feeling it was. To him, this was a novelty. He frowned and pondered for a while, then shook his head. He thought about it. Although it was a novelty to him, it shouldn't be comfortable. It was better for him not to try it. But because he couldn't experience empathy more deeply, he didn't have too much sympathy for Wu Jiasong's experience. Instead, he understood Xiexing better. This person was also a pervert. He had seen too many perverts in this world. First of all, he himself was one. Those demons and cultivators, from a human's point of view, were all perverts. His situation didn't need to be mentioned. It was because of physiological reasons in his previous life, and a strange experience that led to an extremely special psychological condition, which was brought to this life. Although he had already begun to strive to be a normal person in this life, there was still a long way to go to reach his goal. Otherwise, which normal person would be watching here in high spirits? Those demons and cultivators, due to their own reasons, all had incomplete emotions, and were similarly strange. And this Xiexing, when Li Yunqin first saw him, he felt that this person was also quite enigmatic. Calm, steady, smart, and scheming. According to this evaluation, he really shouldn't have let Pan He into the house tonight. Even if he entered the house, he shouldn't have let Pan He into his bed. Impulsive lust would cause people to let down their guard, and they might accidentally reveal key information. But this guy was different. Not only did he have a big fight, but he also seemed to have a very heavy taste. This made Li Yunqin puzzled. He originally thought that before he came here, his identity should be relatively special, and he should have received training. Perhaps he was similar to a secret agent in his world. If he was an ordinary person, because of a soul with the memories and lust of an adult, in the body of a young man in his teens, and suppressed in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. At this time, there was a beautiful woman who took the initiative to come to him, and he did have the ability and capital to do whatever he wanted. Li Yunqin wouldn't be surprised to do what he did tonight. But in a situation where he seemed to have received training, and knew that the environment around him is not very peaceful, it was really too unprofessional to first vent his lust before asking. No powerful character that Li Yunqin knew would do such a thing. There were probably two possibilities for this situation. One possibility was that this person himself had such a personality defect. But Li Yunqin knew that his body seemed to carry important information, and it was fixed to be projected here from another world. It was not a wise choice to use a carrier with such a terrible defect to carry important information. The mastermind behind the scenes who had the ability to achieve such a goal shouldn't be stupid enough to make such a mistake. The other possibility was that he seemed to have never seen a woman before. Or it could be said that the place he came from had very few opportunities to contact women, and his lust was also strongly restrained. On this point, Li Yunqin could see some clues from his first 2 rounds. Because his new body couldn't adapt well to strong stimulation, it was normal for him to be a quick shooter twice. But his jerky movements at the beginning were not normal. He seemed to have indeed had no such experience. So he covered it up with an attitude of arrogance and indifference, and with Pan He's flattery and intentional guidance, he quickly got into the mood. Then, like a child who got a new toy, he couldn't stop playing. These thoughts flashed through his mind in the blink of an eye. At this moment, he remembered many things from the past. Some things that he didn't find strange in the past, but now compared with Xiexing's situation, he finally found some clues. Li Chunfeng and Shen Guanyu sometimes talked about women. In the past, he felt that he was pretending to be a child, and neither of them could tell. Now he knew that both sides were acting. He was pretending to be a child, and the two were pretending to be his parents. They were observing in the dark. Sometimes they would inadvertently talk about things between men and women. It wasn't any hardcore content. It was just some questions about love, and they might have deliberately led him to express his views in a way that would make his parents laugh. Now that he thought about it, if there was a soul hiding in this body with normal desires and normal experiences, under their guidance, he would unintentionally express some views that were normal and not strange compared with his current identity. But Li Yunqin wasn't a normal person, so he couldn't say any normal views. Now that he thought about it, if it was this Xiexing, he probably couldn't say it either. It seemed that because of this, In the eyes of Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu, his identity became more appropriate. It could be counted as a coincidence, but if he used these details as evidence, he should also draw a conclusion. His second inference about Xiesheng was correct. In the other world he came from, there were very few opportunities to interact with women. He used the idea of that world because he had always been faintly aware, and tonight, because of Xiesheng, he finally confirmed one thing. The world that Xiesheng and the elders used to belong to, it wasn't the world that he was familiar with, the world that he came from. As a result, he found the answers to many questions that had puzzled him before. Bai Yanjun once took him to a space of nothingness and said some strange things to him. He meant that if Li Yunxin was the person they were looking for, he should be able to understand what he said. But he couldn't understand. He could only perfunctorily bluff his way through. That was the first time he suspected that there was another real crown prince. Then he went to Cloud Mountain and asked Grandpa D 2 questions. But Grandpa D immediately lost interest in him and saw through his identity. Li Yunxin thought he was a smart person. He wouldn't be so stupid as to carefully prepare 2 questions, but the more he asked, the worse it would get. Now he understood that it wasn't that he was crazy. It was that Grandpa D and he didn't belong to the same world. So naturally, no matter how he asked, it would get him into trouble. It was also at that time that he began to suspect that there was not only another real crown prince, but also another world. That world should also have a highly developed civilization. It might even be more developed than where he came from. In his previous life, he had heard of the so-called March 18th incident. It was said that an unbelievably advanced and mysterious fleet of aircrafts had appeared in his old country. And now, did they also come from the original world where Xiesheng and the elders were? Then what about Chen Zhao, the painting saint? She had left all kinds of details in this world. It was because of those details that Li Yunxin had a preconceived notion that Chen Zhao and the elders should come from the same world as him. Then Chen Zhao, where did he come from? Apart from that, there was another crucial question. That was why did Li Chunfeng, Shang Guanyu, and even the mastermind of Southernwood House behind them observe him for more than 10 years instead of directly asking if he was that person? This illogical situation made Li Yunxin have another bold speculation. It was indeed possible that he was someone else. This someone else didn't refer to someone like Li Yunxin who had a strange fate and ended up in the wrong place. Instead, it referred to the other forces that Southernwood House and the others had included in their plans in advance. It was possible that the person who had been sent here wasn't the real crown prince they wanted, but the impersonator, who was also very dangerous to them. This speculation was very bold, but what he knew now was far beyond the scope of reasonable. If he didn't speculate more boldly, he was afraid that he would always be led by the nose. If he looked at things again with this speculation, it seemed that all the unreasonable things were clear. For example, why did Chen Zhao and the elders of Cloud Mountain all transmigrators, but the Southernwood House force that Chen Zhao left behind had become enemies with the elders? It was possible that they weren't very friendly in the other world. And now this Xiesheng, if he really was the real crown prince, the key information he carried should be very useful to both sides. Therefore, although this guy was wary of the Freemasonry, he wasn't as fearful as Li Yunxin had been. He should also know that he had important information, and that the Freemasonry wouldn't dare to do anything to him. This could also explain why the Freemasonry would always give Li Yunxin a chance of survival despite suppressing him in every possible way. So, what important information was it? In that short instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through Li Yunxin's mind. The surrounding scene seemed to be moving in slow motion in his eyes. Everything that Xiesheng had done tonight had a huge impact on him. It had also opened a new door for him. The countless details that had been stored in his mind finally showed signs of being sorted out. That meant it should be related to the calamity that the Freemasonry people were talking about. The Freemasonry elders used the calamity to brush off their subordinates. This statement wasn't baseless. It was just that they had packaged the truth in a different way. The so-called calamity should be referring to something else. Perhaps the key information that Xie Sheng had could help them resolve the calamity. As for what it was, perhaps he would only have an answer when he understood this world better. When he first came here, he thought that everything was very normal. It was just that there was a different power system. Now, the more he understood, the stranger he felt. What was the so-called weak water? What was the celestial? Why did the Black Yama King die for no reason? Why were everyone, including mortals and cultivators, trapped in this vast midland? This Xie Sheng, was he the person that Mu Nanju really wanted? Xie Sheng would never have thought that after venting for more than 4 hours, Li Yunqin would understand so many questions. If he really knew, he would probably castrate himself out of regret. At this moment, Pan He had already supported Wu Jiasong. Wu Jiasong didn't refuse, and became like a puppet, allowing her to manipulate him. It was as if the mouthful of blood he had just spat out had spat out a lot of things. The two of them walked out. Pan He's expression was the same as usual, as if nothing had happened. Wu Jiasong didn't say a word. Only when they got down from the deck and walked to the side of the ship did the man stop. He slowly withdrew his hand from Pan He's arm and looked at her with a dull gaze. He seemed to be waiting for her to explain. Pan He frowned and looked around. The night was dark, and the sea was foggy. "I'm cold," she said. "Let's go back and talk." But Wu Jiasong didn't move. The man who cared for Pan He so much was gone. Pan He sighed. "All right. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.